best wishes go out to the families that unfortunately were unhoused as a result of the fire on Davis Avenue within the past week. Our great gratitude goes out to the fire department for those who took part in suppressing the fire and kept it from being an even worse fire. I also want to, I know there's some business on the agenda this week having to do with Black History Month. I want to draw particular attention to two people who have been extraordinary in their increase of our understanding of Brookline's history and Brookline's connection to African-American history through, unfortunately, slavery. And that would be Barbara Brown, who is an educator and also the key person behind something known as the Hidden Brookline Project, which she has been building on for years and years, and Malcolm Cawthorn, who has been a terrific leader of Brookline's Medco program. And the two of them collaborated on a remarkable 10-minute summation of the impact of in Brookline of our hidden history of slavery. And that was done through the Brookline BIG at the Cable Connect Access Group. And I commend everyone to sort of just do a Google search, Hidden Brookline, check out the video featuring Barbara and Malcolm. It's terrific. And I'll leave it at that for now.
Thank you. Michael.
Thank you. I just wanted to point out every month, the Office of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Community Relations puts out a community highlights newsletter with a number of goings on in town. So first of all, I want to highly recommend the newsletter, and you can find all of this information on the ODEICR's Engage with Brookline webpage. And I will note, in addition to Black History Month, there are events around the Chinese Lunar New Year, as well as conversations from the Indigenous Peoples Celebration Committee on tribal sovereignty and current affairs.
Great, thank you. Paul?
Thanks, Bernard. We are entering a very important phase in the comprehensive planning process, looking for important community input. So now is a great opportunity for you to have a say in Brookline's future. Monday, we're having an interactive workshop. So that's a town hall Monday, February 9th. That's from 7 to 9 p.m. You can drop in, spend as much time as you want. Our staff members will be there, members of the steering committee will be there, our consultant, and this is an opportunity for you to get very specific and provide input into where housing should be developed, commercial issues around green space and transportation and things of that nature. If in addition to that, there's an opportunity to fill out our online survey, which was launched today. The online survey is very similar to the interactive workshop. So if you don't make it to the interactive workshop, you can also provide similar input and experience with the online survey. And that survey is going to run through March 2nd. So you do have some time, but don't wait till the last minute. And then the third thing, which is unique, we're calling it a meeting in a box. This is a set of tools and questionnaires that any person can use to meet with their neighbors or colleagues or town meeting members and provide specific feedback based on their experience within their hyperlocal area or townwide. So again, it's similar to the type of feedback that we'd get at the workshop or the survey, but this is a little bit more intimate and would be, I think, enjoyable. So 3 opportunities: the workshop on Monday, the online survey through March 2nd, and a meeting in a box where you can host your neighbors and friends. This information is on the town homepage as a news item. And if you are fortunate or unfortunate to be on my email list, I sent it out twice tonight, one with a confusing subject line and one without.
That was the one that got my attention.
Yes, I assume everybody said, oh, what's he doing? So I also did post it on the Team of May list, and we'll be sharing it on the townwide Facebook page. And, you know, one of the areas that would be really helpful is to make sure that we get it out to the school population. And of course, we don't have direct access to that list, but if we could share it with our neighbors and colleagues that have children in the public school system, that'd be really helpful. So thank you.
Great, thank you. Seeing no others, let's move on to public comment. Melanie, let's introduce our audience to the rules.
Sure. Thank you for joining us for public comment. This is an opportunity for us to hear your perspective on the issues in Brookline that matter to you. Each person speaking tonight is limited to 3 minutes. You don't need to use the entire time, but you may if you like. Once 15 minutes has been met, there is an opportunity at the conclusion of the Select Board's business for additional comments. Members of the public sometimes raise questions during public comment. We may be able to provide a quick answer to a question, but are more likely to work with staff to get a more thorough answer and respond over email. The on-screen timer will flash orange when you have 1 minute remaining and red when your time is nearly up. Please conclude your remarks at that time. If you have more to say, you are welcome to send an email to board members expressing your thoughts in greater detail. Any person wishing to speak must begin their comment by identifying themselves with their full name, either their Brookline precinct number or street address, and the specific topic on which they wish to speak. The board encourages but does not require that remote users turn their video on when commenting. So the first person signed up for public comment tonight is Bruce Levin, and Bruce is here with us online. Bruce,
Good
let's
evening.
start the timer.
First, my name is Bruce Levin, and I am a town meeting member from Precinct 17. I live about as close to the center of Coolidge Corner as you can get. Earlier today, I sent out a few points that I hope will assist the select board in discussing Article 7 further out. So unless that, I would be glad to answer any questions. I don't really intend to add to that. I will say though, that as Paul has reminded us by email twice, they went out, we have a comprehensive plan. Let's plan comprehensively. Whatever we do in this area of Coolidge Corner should be part of the bigger plan. Other final thought is we're not building in Skyline Park. We're building in a very busy area. It's a kind of a dingy parking lot begging for something to be done. But whatever is done is going to have just tremendous consequences commercially, residentially, traffic, etc. Thank you very much.
And next?
That it?
That's it.
Unless there are any questions, I just refer you to my written comments.
We'll read the written comments. We do not respond with questions.
Okay, we have, bear with me while I pull up our attendees.
Well, while you're looking, I just wanted to mention that the Business Wire just hit that Banco Santander is buying Webster Bank for $12 billion. So one of them is going to be abandoning their office space in Coolidge Corner.
Okay. Second speaker signed up for public comment is Linda Pelkey. Linda, if you want to share your camera.
It should be on.
Yep, she's there.
Okay. Good evening. I'm Linda Olson Pelkey, a town meeting member from Precinct 17. I'm on the Advisory Committee Land Use Subcommittee and Vice Chair of the Comprehensive Plan Steering Committee. And I'm here tonight to ask you to not advance the RFI process as proposed by the consultants and members of the Center Street Lot Committee. I suggest we hold off for the following reasons. As you've heard already several times, the comprehensive plan We are in the midst of our second big public engagement effort to get feedback on where, how much, and what type of new development is desirable. Results from this feedback will identify areas for further engagement and refining, leading to zoning changes. The last committee stated that one of their guiding principles is to be in harmony with the town's broader planning efforts. Surely such an impactful project should be evaluated in the broader context of townwide planning. It feels disingenuous to ask the public to share their thoughts and then signal an assent to one specific proposal. The committee's charge and engagement. The charge for the committee did not include housing. The survey done did not ask about development options. The event at the theater was as much about folks going to see a lecture by a well-known planning expert on walkability as it was about picking a preferred development proposal, one that would fundamentally alter the look, feel, and function of our most important commercial area. My constituents have told me they worry about access to Coolidge Corner if the parking lot is unavailable or fundamentally changed. Public land. Center Street lots are incredibly valuable town assets. Some concerns have been raised about having less control over our public resources and the financial implications of maintaining the structure and keeping parking rates favorable for our businesses with this proposal. Coolidge Corner works. Is such a major disruption really the way to assure its continued success? Owning the land gives us many advantages. I don't see this scheme making best use of that. Many more voices should be heard and further investigations needed before we could confidently move forward. And lastly, there's a drastic difference between surface parking and structured parking. Using the Center Street lot is a familiar and comfortable experience for local and regionally generated car trips. The change to structured parking as the sole parking available to our local business center, other than on-street parking, needs to be evaluated long and hard by many stakeholders. People are more willing to park in structures for long-term parking or infrequently. The surface lot is functional for both long and short-term parking and is used that way. No one wants to pop into CVS to grab something and park in a parking structure. Also, I would hate to see the parking rates rise to pay for maintaining the structure. Please recommit to an honest plan process. These interesting ideas for consideration as part of that plan. Thank you.
Okay. Our next speaker is Daryl Donatelli. Daryl, you're on mute.
Mr. Jennifer, you can unmute yourself now.
His is unable to use.
That's the best.
Work on that.
Yep.
Sorry, we're working on it. There we go.
There it is.
There we go. Very good. Yes, I kept getting an error. All right. Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. Hi, Daryl Donatelli here. I live at 80 Craftsland, but in fact, I am representing the Chestnut Hill Village Associates, which is the area that is Craftsland Road, Arlington Road, Lyon Road, and a portion of Heath Street. And I appreciate the opportunity to make this comment. So there was a mention at the advisory committee meeting that has to do with the transfer station and the approval of a project to create a temporary prefab enclosed structure for trash processing. We wholeheartedly support that project. We think it's an excellent idea. And the challenge that we have with it is the timeline for completion. So the project itself is slated for an 8 to 10 month window, which means that this project wouldn't be completed until toward the end of 2026, which takes us through all of the very hot summer months. We had issues last year with the wafting odors of trash coming off the transfer station hill, and that impacts Skyline Park. It impacts our neighborhood, and we would like to call to attention of the select board and others the need to find an accelerated timeline associated with this project. Again, making it through that summer period when trash smell is at its peak is just not acceptable to our neighbors. And even on these winter days, when the wind blows just right, we can smell it just as it is. So I appreciate Select Board's consideration of the topic. There was a letter that was emailed last night. Hopefully everyone had a chance to read the letter. It's just a one-page letter associated from our neighborhood association. And again, representing the issues that we had and our ask for an accelerated timeline. So thank you very much. I was learned, be brief, be bright, be gone. And so I'm all done with my comment. Thank you.
Bernard, can I ask a quick question? Not of the speaker,
Sure.
town administrator. Chaz, is this something that we could ask? I don't know if it's even feasible, ask DPW if there's any way to accelerate the timeline on this?
And we received Mr. Donatelli and the whole team's letter, and we're obviously, we're equally concerned about this issue. The timing, the temporary permit that we have there currently. We are doing everything in our power to accelerate this, but there are two big considerations that we have to deal with here. One is winter. It's just very difficult for us to get anything going right now, given that the transfer station is also where we're storing a lot of snow, and winter gear and so forth. So we've got to take that into consideration. So that was going to delay our start. And then there are processes that we have to follow in terms of zoning in order to get this going. Even a temporary structure is going to require us to deal with some of the zoning complexities. And then the last sort of issue here is the budget. We are meeting later this week to try and figure out how to get this going. But the budget is extremely tight. We are going to prioritize this as best we can in order to get this moving forward. But realistically, when you factor in, we can't get anything started at the site in the winter. The zoning processes that we're going to have to go through, apart from, the biggest issue being right now, the requirement that we install permanent restrooms up there. Even with a temporary structure, we're going to need some kind of variance for that. And then this issue of the funding. But we're trying to solve that last issue. We're trying to solve the second issue. And then when the winter ends, we want to be ready to move as quickly as possible.
So when you say zoning, we don't need approval of town meeting for zoning. This
No.
is to be compliant with code.
Yes. Or we could seek a reprieve from the ZBA.
Okay.
So one of the other ways, one way or the other, we will be doing that.
Okay.
David, Melanie, do we have any other speakers?
We have nobody signed up,
Okay.
and there are approximately 25 people online and nobody is raising their hand.
Okay, we'll close the public comment section. David?
Are there any temporary measures? I know this is a temporary measure as well, but are there any additional temporary within the temporary measures for addressing the wafting aromas?
We're talking about that as well. We're trying to figure out, again, we don't like it. We know the neighbors don't like it. We're trying to figure out how to make this as quick and painless as possible. But that is just, it's a real, this is one of those things that's just, the deeper you go, the more complex it gets. And so we're trying, our goal right now is to get that temporary structure up as quickly as possible. But knowing that even, I don't want to go into the details. I will bore you with the details of
It's
where
complicated.
does the grease go? Where does the, there's a lot of stuff that needs to be built into this beyond just building a prefab structure up there. If it were that simple, we would do it. So we're trying to figure out how to both mitigate what's currently there and speed up the process of getting a temporary building up.
All right, but there are some measures that could be taken short of completion of the temporary structure to try to address the odor.
We're trying to figure that out now.
Okay.
Especially this is right now what we have is temporary forbearance from the state to let us do this, and which we're very grateful for. And so we're trying to figure out with the state what's feasible in terms of mitigation and what isn't.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Moving along to our miscellaneous calendar. Question of approving the meeting minutes from January 27, 2026. I see that I think John had some edits to the minutes.
Well, I think that may have been taken care of depending on whether Michael's request or suggestion that the paragraph be removed, right?
It wasn't the paragraph. There was one sentence that referred to the goals of the committee, and I didn't see that referenced in the conversation. So I was going to strike that sentence, which included your edit.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Unless anyone has objections, I'd like to move that the minutes for January 27th be approved as amended. All in favor, John Van Scoyac.
Aye.
Paul Warren.
Aye.
David Perlman.
Aye.
Michael Rubenstein.
Aye.
And chair votes aye. Excuse me. So I'd like to take items 3B to 3E in omnibus fashion, except that item 3D will only include the fire department pieces. That's the second and third item there. The police department piece involving the Blue Voice Inc. software will be voted next week. But in the meantime, Chief Pastor is here, as I understand, to explain what the software is. I assume it's software and its capabilities and limitations.
Well, the chief is going to come next week, was to
Okay.
talk a little bit more about
Okay,
this.
I thought
We
you-
wanted to make sure that, select board members had the opportunity to ask questions in advance and for her to be able to come prepared with any responses there. But
Super.
yes, so
Thank you.
we're postponing a week.
I had actually also had questions for both the chief of police and the fire chief on this.
Okay.
So would it be possible to actually defer the entire item?
Yes, we can do that. I'm happy to, we can defer the whole, and I'll ask the fire chief to be present as well.
What I thought we were going to do is to discuss the capabilities of this software so that over the week, people can look into that explanation in terms of whether it has the ability to do more than, just search through documents.
I can talk a little bit about that, but I also want to be sure that the chief gets the opportunity to speak through that and give folks reassurance. This program, this software that's being proposed, this app really is not generative AI. It doesn't create new material. What it does is it synthesizes policy material that's uploaded into it. It doesn't synthesize other material. It's not able to, for example, access databases of crime or anything like that. It's not able to do any of that sort of analysis, nor would we, nor if if it were capable of it, we would be asking it to. We do have a town-wide generative AI policy, which is available on the website. If you go to the information technology section and look at policies that the select board recently approved, it talks about how personally identifying information is not to be fed into these AI systems, and how about the importance of security and use on that front. But this is not what this is. The goal of this software is to basically provide a reference source to police officers who need it in terms of on-the-job questions that they may have. It's a more effective search engine. So as opposed to searching for terms in a PDF, while they're looking to see, or what does the policy say about this, they can ask a natural language question and get a natural language answer with citations saying, yep, this document says that X is the policy. Here's why. And, that's it. That's what this is intended to do. But I want to make sure that the chief is here to answer those questions from you, but I do want to reassure folks that, based on our conversations, this is not a generative AI thing. This is not being used in terms of detective work or anything along those lines. It is just a more effective way of being able to consolidate all of our various policies and procedures, which if you have read the police handbook, it's 700 plus pages, in a way that allows for natural language searches and responses.
Could we add that software for our zoning code?
I would, we'll ask.
Well, we have a separate type of software for that.
Yes, but we don't yet have that, the AI integration there.
Chair?
Yeah, I'm
Sorry.
sorry.
Just on the question of scheduling, just the police portion of the vote that we're deferring tonight. The Police Commissioners Advisory Committee meeting, if I understand correctly, advised us during the day today that they want to have their own meeting and look into this. And since they are, our advisory committee, it would seem, appropriate to me that we wait until they've had their chance at a meeting and some examination of this.
Let me talk to the chief and the PCAC chair about that. I got that email as well, and I want to make sure. But again, I want to, for one thing, yes, you want to use it is a police commissioners advisory committee. You want to use that appropriately. But I also think that this is, I worry that we're making this into something more than it should be potentially. But if after talking through it, that's what they want to do, then that's what we'll do. But I just want to be, I also want us to not, I think justifiably people see the term AI in something, or like we're using AI for X, and they say, oh man, that jumps immediately to this sort of, Tom Cruise Minority Report situation when it comes to the police. And but I get that. I get that that's a very natural reflex response, is that I don't want generative AI or, one of these big, LLM models that claims to be able to do everything, suddenly running the police department. But that's not what this is. It's a very simple piece of technology.
Is there a time constraint here?
So there's no immediate time constraint here. This is federally funded money. It's money that was left over from a previous year. So ultimately, if we don't pick it up by spring, then the other communities will reallocate it to someone else. And when that happens, that tends to mean that we are less likely to get that money in the future, because this is not the first time Brookline has turned back money. Not for anything you've done. That was actually partially my fault. But we don't want to be in a situation where we're saying to them, we would love this extra money, and then we have to turn it back.
John?
Oh, well, Paul actually had been
Oh,
raising.
I just wanted to follow up on John said, just so that we can check the boxes.
Yeah.
Right, and not have additional questions that then we have to go back. It might make sense to let the Police Commission Advisory Committee speak with the chief.
Okay.
And just go through this and see if there's anything that they're concerned about that they'd like to communicate to us. Like John, I think it's a good idea to use our advisors that we appoint to give us feedback if there's questions. And if anything, that helps settle the public that this is not some scary surveillance technology. I think that would be worth the step. So.
Okay, I'll take that back to the chief. Thank you.
John?
And just, by way of further explanation, to those in the public who might wonder, why should there be, sensitivity about this? There are some people in the community who are far more knowledgeable than I am about these issues. And we are at a very delicate moment in terms of the relationship of local entities to federal entities, especially the Department of Homeland Security, under which this particular agency, which is known as UASI, operates. And I think we'd be, at risk of seeming to turn a deaf ear to people's concerns about relationships, and what is tied, what kind of possibilities arise when we enter into relationships, even something as innocent seeming as, a relatively small grant for a piece of software. But that's really the level at which we have to examine these things right now. We have to kind of examine them in the UASI context and the Department of Homeland Security context in order to have a consistent policy. I think that's really why I was concerned.
Yeah, add one more thing,
Well-
Bernard. So so that this doesn't turn into a never-ending
Yeah.
hole of inquiry, could we ask the PCAC to do this in one sitting? This should not take multiple meetings, a continuance. If they want to have the chief come explain it, might be good to have our chief information officer there to answer any technical questions if that's helpful. But this thing should not go on and delay
No, I
the
agree.
chief's adoption of the grant. I wouldn't want it to hold us up too much.
But just so people are realistic, the PCAC probably won't meet until the end of this month. So it is going to be a period of weeks before
Or you
they
can ask them to
they have
meet
their meeting.
Especially,
Oh, well, we can ask. Yeah, sure.
yeah, I mean, this is a type of thing that
Yeah, sure.
adjust their schedules, but I would urge people to go to the Blue Voice Inc. website just to get a sense of what we're talking about. It's not as elaborate and
Scary.
scary
Mhm.
as it may seem at first blush. But I think what John noted as to the sort of difficult relationship we're having in this country between the federal and local officials is something that we can't just ignore. And especially in light of the fact that some of the technologies similar to this may be being used to just monitor people who are out of line with the party line. So,
And Bernard, I think it's important too that we affirm that we have great confidence in our police chief, and this isn't second guessing her judgment at all. This is really about making sure that the public understands and has an opportunity to understand what's happening, and we can be advised from the PCAC. So I think it's beneficial for the.
Okay, so we have items, three, it has changed. Three, B through three D, I'm sorry, 3B through 3E, but not 3D. So items 3B, 3C, 3E, and we don't have an F. Okay, so all in favor of those items in the miscellaneous calendar, please indicate by saying aye.
Sorry,
John?
that we do it, well, F says Proclamation of Black History Month on my,
Oh, I'm sorry.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Um,
And F,
my notes
yeah.
and F.
Yeah.
Okay, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye. John Van Scoyac.
Aye.
Paul Warren.
Aye.
David Perlman.
Aye.
Michael Rubenstein.
Aye.
And chair votes aye. And with respect to the proclamation, we've been reading proclamations in total that these meetings. I think that's important because our vast TV audience would like to know what we're voting on and how we're thinking on various things. So I'd like to read the proclamation. It's not as long as some proclamations that I've read, but bear with me. Okay, whereas the Brookline Select Board believes that there is no accurate American history that does not include the history of all Americans, including Black Americans, and that teaches the reality of the intertwined history and destiny of all Americans. And whereas the teaching of American history has often failed to include or has erased the history, culture, and contributions of Black Americans, and whereas such erasure can pose a grave danger to the physical and psychological health and well-being of Black Americans when they are told that they have no history and have made no positive contributions to American or world history, and when the wider society believes such untruths, and whereas today, under the current administration in Washington, the danger is being exacerbated by a systematic effort to erase references to the history and achievements of Black Americans from public places, and whereas such erasure includes removing historical items from the Smithsonian museums in Washington, D.C., including the National Museum of African American History, erasing references to slavery and other historical facts from National Park Service sites, and petty insults of Black Americans, such as eliminating Martin Luther King Day and Juneteenth from the days that access to national parks are free. And whereas such erasure includes attacking efforts to remedy past discrimination by attempting to ban references and initiatives for diversity, equity, and inclusion in American cultural, educational, governmental, and business institutions, including purging National Park Service gift shops of supposedly DEI-related merchandise, and even banning words that positively describe Black Americans and other Americans that are supportive of America's diversity. And whereas such erasure has in the history of America been the precursor to waves of white supremacist violence, anti-Black riots and massacres, resulting in death and widespread destruction of Black communities in many parts of the country. And whereas one of the many tools available to resist such attacks against Black Americans is National Black History Month, which recognizes and pays tribute to the contributions that Black Americans have made to American history by their struggles for freedom and equality, and provides morale-boosting lessons of past struggles for equality and the successes that they achieved. And whereas the history of Black History Month began when historian Dr. Carter G. Woodson in 1926 organized historians and others through the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History, which he founded in 1915 to encourage the teaching of Black history in the public schools and to designate a time initially called Negro History Week to educate people about Black history and culture as a critical component of the advancement of Blacks in America. And whereas this year is the centennial anniversary of the founding of what is now Black History Month, which for 100 years has celebrated Black history and has provided examples and guides on how to resist and prevail against governmental and non-governmental sponsored erasure and rewriting of history and hostile actions that follow an erasure of a people's history. And whereas this is also the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, a document that includes the historically powerful and currently relevant words, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, which should be seen as one of the many reasons to celebrate an accurate history of Black Americans as an indispensable part of an accurate and useful American history. And whereas each February, the Association for the Study of African American Life and History designates a new theme for Black History Month in keeping with the practice of Carter G. Woodson, and the theme for 2026 is a century of Black history commemorations, highlighting a century of intentional efforts to study, preserve, and celebrate the history, culture, and contributions of people of African descent in America and around the globe. Now, therefore, the Select Board of the Town of Brookline, Massachusetts hereby proclaims that Black History Month shall be celebrated during the month of February in Brookline. And in furtherance of this proclamation, the Brookline Select Board hereby urges town departments and other local governmental and non-governmental bodies to develop programs, ceremonies, and activities to recognize and celebrate Black History Month as appropriate to their missions, urges residents, visitors, and people passing through Brookline to use the month of February to start a year-round process to study, learn about, and reflect on the history, culture, and contributions of Black people in America, whether American-born, foreign-born citizens, or immigrants to America. Urges residents, visitors, and people passing through Brookline to take advantage of the many programs being produced for National Black History Month in Brookline and in the surrounding metropolitan area, including those programs listed or linked on the web pages of the Brookline Public Library, Office of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Community Relations, Public Schools of Brookline, the Martin Luther King Jr. Celebration Committee, and the Brookline Select Board. Urges residents, visitors, and people passing through Brookline to use National Black History Month as an opportunity to visit the exhibits, performances, and lectures related to African American history, literature, and art at local museums, universities, and concert halls. Urges residents, visitors, and people passing through Brookline to study the works of the many creative and intellectual African Americans with connections to Brookline, including Florida Ruffin Ridley, a pioneering civil rights leader, suffragist, and Harlem Renaissance writer, who with her husband, Ulysses Ridley, was one of the early Black homeowners in Brookline at 131 Kent Street, and the namesake of the Ridley Elementary School in Brookline. Roland Hayes, an American tenor who is hailed as having one of the greatest voices of his time, and the namesake of the Hayes Elementary School in Brookline. Artist John Wilson, a renowned sculptor and artist who lived and worked in Brookline for over 50 years and whose maquette bust of Martin Luther King Jr. is displayed on the first floor of this Brookline Town Hall. And Marita Bonner, who wrote for the Brookline High School newspaper, the Sagamore, and became an influential African-American short story writer, essayist, and playwright of the Harlem Renaissance. Thank you for bearing with me on that recitation of the proclamation. And it's, of course, in our select board packet for those who want to keep it as a keepsake. Okay, good. Okay. So let's move on to our main calendar. And the first item is an interview of an applicant for the Board of Zoning Appeals, Lark Palermo. I see she's in the audience and is coming to the podium. Please introduce yourself and tell us why you're interested in the Board of Zoning Appeals.
My name is Lark Palermo, and I live at 828 Hammond Street. And I have previously served on the Zoning Board of Appeals here in Brookline. My husband and I moved to a high-rise condo in Cambridge just about a year ago, and I resigned from the Zoning Board of Appeals because I assumed I was not going to be a resident, but discovered soon after moving that we didn't like high-rise living in Cambridge. And we were fortunate that our house hadn't sold. So we moved back to 828 Hammond Street. And I'm once again a resident of the town of Brookline. And as a result, having run into a few of my colleagues recently at a professional luncheon, was urged to consider reapplying to become an associate member of the ZBA. And that is why I am here. I would be honored, honestly, to serve the town again. I got a lot of reward from feeling that I was doing something for the residents and the town of Brookline, and I'd like to have that same feeling of reward again.
Great, thank you. You know, I usually make a statement before we interview people about what we're looking for in members of the board that is being interviewed for. I forgot to do that. I apologize. Let me just
Okay.
emphasize what I think is really the most important piece. And I'm not suggesting it applies to you, but I just want to make sure that the public knows that in general, we're looking for people who can work effectively and respectfully with other members of the public body and the town staff that will be working with the public body. So I have no reason to believe that that doesn't apply to you, but it's just very important that we understand that on boards and commissions, members have to work with town staff, and that working relationship should be as smooth as possible.
Well, I wholeheartedly agree. And one of the reasons serving on the Board of Appeals was so pleasant and helpful for me in my professional career is because of the level of professionalism that we have here at the Department of Planning and Development. And I worked closely with the people in that department and would intend to do so again if reappointed.
So let me ask you a question to start off. How would you use your background in affordable housing in particular on the ZBA in a way that's different from the way that other members would use their backgrounds?
Well, I think
You have a broad background and experience in affordable housing. It's
I
quite impressive.
do. And it was beneficial for me to have that background because with the community builders, the projects that we undertook when I was working there were primarily rental and then subsidized rental housing, mixed income. And then moving to Habitat for Humanity, the model is home ownership. So what I got was sort of broad experience in both subsidized rental and affordable home ownership projects. Also, Habitat for Humanity, they're both nonprofit organizations, but Habitat was one that raised money from donations, whereas the Community Builders was funded differently through subsidized funding and federal grants. So I learned a lot about financing affordable housing from both positions.
Well,
First, welcome home.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
You weren't gone too long.
No,
Has anything changed?
no.
Okay, so you coming before us actually offers us a very unique opportunity because I don't think we have sitting ZBA members or past ZBA members coming and re-interviewing that I can think of. What are your thoughts about things we should be doing different? So you were on before, you left a little time. I mean, is there some things that we should be doing either in the ZBA or town-wide or zoning-wise or planning-wise? How can we help you?
Well, I appreciate the question, and I'm probably not the best one to be speaking on behalf of the entire ZBA, but I can say from my perspective, one of the things that's really working here is the support that the ZBA gets from the staff at the town planning and zoning, and I mean planning and development department. And keeping that staff and keeping it well-staffed is a really important part of the town function would be my advice. We also got a lot of good support from the town council's office because there are occasions where we need to interact with them. And lastly, I would say, I understand we went back and forth with whether we were above the 10% or below the 10%, and had 40B projects we got when I was sitting on the ZBA. For a period of time, there were an exceptionally large number of 40B proposals, which was very challenging. And I don't think there's anything the select board can do about that, but I think that pushed everyone as far as it possibly could in terms of expectations on what we could accomplish in a time frame that was limited.
Okay, thank you.
I think,
Yeah.
David.
I have a related question. So in your application, you state that your goal would be to improve the zoning process by working more closely with the planning department and planning board rather, and also with development. So could you elaborate on that? What specifically would you look to improve?
Well, I think what I wrote, at least what I intended to write in the application, was that it was to the extent necessary, working with, and I meant working with the staff of the Planning and Development Office to improve, if necessary, the process for appeals. And part of that means if we as a board can interact with them more clearly and openly, it's incumbent upon us to tell them what they can do to help us serve better in our roles. And as I said, the relationship's really good. So I don't have anything I'd add at this point.
I think Michael or yeah, let's go with Michael.
Okay.
I don't know.
Sort of following on these questions about improving the system overall, I'm just wondering how you think about the various plans, such as the housing production plan or the comprehensive plan, and studies that we're doing in Brookline, and how that might inform either the work of the ZBA or you're thinking about improving processes.
The plans are extremely well done based on my background in dealing with the consultants that we rely on to produce plans and studies for the town. And really in my role as general counsel at the Community Builders and CEO of Habitat, we would employ consultants. And, Judy Barrett immediately comes to mind as someone who was an enormously helpful consultant when I was sitting on the ZBA. And so I can't think of any improvement I would suggest at this point, because I think it's working pretty well.
Thank you.
John?
Lark, I just wanted to say that when I saw this item on the agenda, I glanced at it. Maybe I wasn't paying sufficient attention, and I just thought she's coming up for reappointment, and this is this is easy. This is automatic. And I do hope your tale is a cautionary one for people in Brookline who, have the mistaken notion that life will be better in a Cambridge high-rise, because
Well, there you go. Yes, I would say that's certainly true. And I will say, now I've been through that experience, I have actually run into a couple of other people that have had similar experiences, not necessarily who lived in Brookline, but people who lived in other towns who
yes,
returned.
sadder but wiser,
Yes.
and then they return to Brookline.
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay.
It's an expensive lesson to learn. I don't advise people do it.
For any who, might be unaware, to serve on the zoning board of appeals requires a lot of specialized knowledge, and it helps to have some experience. And, we have a candidate in front of us who has both. And if this had been a reappointment, I have a feeling it would have been kind of automatic. Now that you've gone through reapplication and interview, we'll decide what next week, right, Chair? I mean, we don't usually
We can do it
decide
next week.
on the spot,
Yeah,
but yeah,
talk to Melanie regarding who else is in the hopper, but.
yeah.
Yeah, do we have other applicants?
Do we, Melanie?
I'd have to check with Kate.
Okay, we'll
We can-
find out, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't mean to make it sound as though any other applicant, we would skip over that. By no means did I intend that.
Yeah.
But I do know that these positions are kind of hard to fill, and it's our good fortune that you've decided to apply to return.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Okay.
Okay, any other questions? Thank you, Lark.
Thank you for your time.
And well, and also welcome back, you know.
Thank you. It feels really good to be, I feel at home here.
I
Thanks.
mean, don't say anything bad about Cambridge though, because we have
like
people in our
It's a
group
great
here who
community.
live there.
Cambridge is a great neighbor. It's
Yes.
okay.
Oh, I forgot that part.
Okay, next item on the agenda is the Chestnut Hill Commercial Area Study. And I see Meredith Mooney has already approached the podium, and I'd like to hear from her. And then before we go into general questions from the select board, I want Michael Rubenstein to sort of follow up with some comments also.
Thank
Which
you.
I assume you know about, right?
Yes, and I think former select board member Mike Sandman, who's been chairing the community advisory group, is also here and would like to follow up on my presentation with some remarks, if that's okay.
Okay,
Okay.
let me go, you, Michael, and then that Michael.
Let's do it the other way. Let's do Meredith.
Okay, whatever. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So good evening. I'm going to share screen. Oh, it's not going full screen.
Can I ask a question while she's preparing?
Sure.
Actually of us, not of the committee. So it came up last night at EDAB about when they could hold a public hearing and vote on the zoning articles. And I believe the right answer is they need to wait till the warrant is published.
Correct.
Right? They can't get ahead of it.
Well, they can get ahead of the process. I mean, again, if they want to, we could talk to them about what makes sense, in terms of input, scheduling and so forth.
Yeah.
Yes, we can do other things.
Right.
But in terms of holding the hearing, it's after the warrant is
Yeah,
executed.
the public needs access to the warrant, be able to
Yes,
read it
correct.
before they.
Correct. Once
show up.
you execute the warrant, send it out into the
Yeah.
world, then.
I would
officially-
suggest more than a few hours between the publishing and holding the public hearing.
Thank you, Paul. So Meredith Mooney, Economic Development Director. I'm very excited to be here this evening to present our recommendations from the Chestnut Hill Commercial Area Study. So the study has its origins in the 2005 Comprehensive Plan. It was identified as Gateway West. I think over the past few decades, there's been a lot of emphasis and focus on the Gateway East proposal in the 2005 Comprehensive Plan, focused on Brookline Village. And there was a separate set of recommendations focused on the Chestnut Hill commercial area as sort of the western gateway along Boylston Street to Brookline. And those recommendations proposed comprehensive district planning for the commercial area and zoning changes to promote mixed-use development, with a particular emphasis on the area's potential for supporting additional commercial development. And, in reading portions of the comprehensive plan about Chestnut Hill, there was this acknowledgement that the commercial area really was not living up to its potential as a vibrant commercial area on par with Coolidge Corner, Brookline Village, and Brookline's other distinctive, very vibrant commercial areas. So today, the Chestnut Hill Commercial Area Study is focused on two main objectives, which were included in the scope of work and project objectives that the Select Board approved back in November of 2023 as we were preparing to launch the study process. And so we've been focused on examining opportunities and creating strategies to advance the objectives of incentivizing significant net new commercial tax growth and enhancing the livability and identity of the Chestnut Hill commercial area. So we have three requests from the Select Board this evening. We are requesting endorsement of the study recommendations and next steps for implementation. And then we're also seeking authorization to move forward with filing a warrant article package related to the zoning recommendation in the study. And that zoning package, the warrant article package, would include 3 warrant articles. There would be a zoning bylaw amendment that would incorporate the overlay zoning into the zoning bylaw, make any additional required changes to the zoning bylaw, and then 2 separate warrant articles authorizing the Select Board to enter into a memorandum of agreement as well as a tax certainty agreement with City Realty, which is the property owner of the Chestnut Hill Office Park.
Okay, can I interrupt a second? And maybe I misheard you. Are you looking for a vote tonight?
I think we're presenting and that
Okay,
at some point
fine.
over the next few weeks, you'd feel comfortable
Okay, I'm
voting on
sorry.
these
I
items.
misheard.
And then finally, we're just hoping to establish who the petitioner for the warrant articles would be. Would it be the select board or the planning department? And so those are just things to think about as I work through the presentation and over the next few weeks. And there is a lot to get through. I'm going to try to move forward as quickly as possible. If it's possible, I think it would be helpful for me to go through the entire presentation and then circle back to questions. I did include page numbers on all of the slides to make it easy to reference back places where you had questions or we could do a deeper dive. That being said, if there are real clarity concerns, please let me know before I move on from the slide and we'll clear that up. So I wanted to first and foremost thank the members of the staff-led community advisory group who we have been working with. They've helped inform staff's work as we've been developing our study recommendations, and they provided really tremendous feedback and input that has helped shape our recommendations. Also, Melanie wanted me to underscore that there are a few additional slides included in the presentation tonight, and I will just flag those as we go through them. I think they're 3 or 4 at most. So this was not included in the original slide in your packet, but I did also want to acknowledge members of the Economic Development Advisory Board's ad hoc subcommittee that they had assembled to help support staff in developing the policy proposals. And this subcommittee, which was George Cole, Mark Barrere, and Ken Lewis and Sandy Silk, assisted with doing some additional financial feasibility analysis around potential development scenarios. They helped us evaluate the proposed uses and the level of density in the zoning recommendations to make sure that those aligned with the economic development potential in the Chestnut Hill commercial area. And then they were also very helpful in thinking through where we can build in strategies to the zoning and elsewhere to make sure that we're appropriately mitigating potential risk to the town in terms of moving forward with rezoning and redevelopment proposals. So this is an overview of the project timeline and sort of underscoring opportunities for public meetings and public comment. The process kicked off in spring, summer of 2024 with our outreach and community engagement. And since that time, the Community Advisory Group has convened almost 20 times. All of those meetings, typically at least a quarter of those were devoted to the opportunity for public comment. The EDAB subcommittee has convened 10 times. There was also opportunity for public comment during those meetings. I could spend a lot of time on the next 2 slides, but I'm going to restrain myself in the interest of being concise and leaving time for discussion and questions. But these are a few slides of photos of the Chestnut Hill commercial area to sort of demonstrate existing conditions and, you know, to provide some helpful reference for people who might not be as familiar with the study area or have had the opportunity to walk around there. So the study area is about 27 acres. It includes approximately 60 properties and 30 storefront businesses. It's a mix of 1 or 2-story commercial buildings and 2 family or multifamily housing. This is an area of town that has seen a lot of 40B development in recent years. So in the upper left-hand corner, these photos were taken over the summer and fall of 2025. And in the upper left-hand corner, you can see the 1180 Boylston Street 40B development at the corner of Boylston and Hammond Street under construction. And then if you go 3 boxes over, there's also a 40B proposed, the Heath and Sheaf 40B development that would be at this dry cleaners property on Hammond Street between Heath and Sheaf and Heath Street as well. So these photos, I'm moving from Boylston Street towards the Heath Street side of the study area. And so the upper left-hand corner, you have some photos of Sheaf Street, which is sort of interior to the study area. There are a couple photos. The third photo, you can see the contrast and sort of the new height precedent that the 40B at 1180 has established in contrast to the existing 2-family and 1-story commercial buildings. And then to the all the way to the right here in the top box, you see you're approaching Holyhood Cemetery. Moving from Boylston to Heath Street throughout the study area, it's a very different experience. Boylston, I think everyone's pretty familiar with it, having driven through the area. And Heath Street, by comparison, is very narrow, quiet, leafy, a lot of tree canopy coverage, and a large stretch of Heath Street runs parallel to the Holyhood Cemetery. sorry, just before moving on. So I did just want to point out that a couple of these slides show several surface parking lots, and there are several of those throughout the study area. So opportunities that we've identified in the Chestnut Hill commercial area study is there's a real opportunity to establish a vision and organizing framework for the commercial area so that can come up to par with the other successful commercial areas in Brookline, like Coolidge Corner and Brookline Village. There's also the opportunity to address the town's long-term structural budget deficits by incentivizing high-impact economic development that will help bolster the tax base. And finally, there's an opportunity to add additional housing and additional residential density that will be really important and critical in providing 24-hour activation of the area and making sure that the ground floor retail there is vibrant and successful. Another important opportunity to underscore is the redevelopment of the Chestnut Hill Office Park. So the Chestnut Hill Office Park is one of a very limited set of remaining opportunities of large sites located in commercial areas that would lend themselves to a significant amount of commercial development. So the Chestnut Hill Office Park is all the way to the right here at 1280 to 1330 Boylston Street. The other two opportunities are along Harvard Street at the Stop and Shop and TJ Maxx properties. I did just want to note the acreage for each of these properties is on the bottom here, and the Chestnut Hill Office Park is more than double the size of the other two opportunities. This is another slide that I could spend a lot of time on, and I'm happy to come back to, but I will try to be brief. So this is an overview of sort of the dominant themes that we've heard throughout the community engagement process when we were doing our initial outreach and engagement, as well as public comment throughout all of the meetings that we've held throughout the study process. And I would say this is not comprehensive, but these are just certainly the highlights. So a real desire, particularly from the neighborhood, is to have successful ground floor retail spaces that align with the neighborhood's needs. There's a lot of discussion in contrast to, the offerings at the street, which is a very vibrant, successful development on the Newton side across from the study area. But, there are higher end offerings. You would have to cross Route 9. There's definitely a sense that it doesn't seem that the area can currently retain, restaurants, coffee shops, bookshops, the types of ground floor retail that lend themselves more to community building. And that's certainly an important need that we came through loud and clear through community engagement. Preserving the character of Heath Street for the reasons that I mentioned earlier. Height and density required for economic viability. I did want to acknowledge and underscore for the select board that among the community advisory group members, there's a diversity of opinions regarding the proposed heights and density in the 4.0 subdistrict required for economic viability and to meet the study objectives. And those opinions range from supportive to staunch opposition. Improving the quality of the pedestrian experience and multimodal safety, leading priority, and then traffic impacts. The area is considered already, very congested, difficult to move through, and there's concern that adding additional density will exacerbate the existing problems. This is a diagram summarizing the key components of the study area. I'm going to be walking through each of these components and the related recommendations. So the vision for the Chestnut Hill commercial area is to create a vibrant, dense, walkable, mixed-use neighborhood with high tax-generating commercial uses. And I did want to I think it's important to note, and just in terms of setting proper expectations, is that we anticipate that it will take decades to fulfill this vision. So that's just an important consideration, that this will not happen overnight. This is sort of a longer term goal. So the zoning, we're proposing the adoption of special district overlay zoning to help realize the vision that we discussed on the previous slide. The most recent draft of the zoning, which we're really in fine tuning mode at this point, was included in your packets this evening. For, we're not going to go into sort of a deep dive nitty gritty of the zoning proposal, but I did think it was important to provide an overview of the key strategies that we're employing to advance that goal of incentivizing significant net new commercial tax growth. So the minimum commercial requirement and ground floor commercial requirement have their own slides that I'll get to shortly. So in this slide, I did just want to emphasize that, we've been focused on providing adequate dimensional requirements to ensure it. So examples would be height, FAR, setbacks, to make sure that within the context of mixed-use development, which is what we're looking to incentivize and expect in this area, that developers are able to maximize the commercial piece of that mixed-use proposal. And then we're also proposing the expansion of allowed uses, which I think is most significant, particularly regarding the Office 2.0 subdistrict, which is the Chestnut Hill Office Park. Right now has very restrictive zoning, pretty much restricted to one commercial use, which is office, that particularly after COVID just does not have a lot of viability. So this is a diagram of the study and the proposed zoning overlay. It has 4 sub-districts. We're going to do a quick tour of the sub-districts a little bit later on. But I did just want to point out at least name the sub-districts and then make a couple of points. So in the northern part of the study area, this is the transit-oriented mixed-use sub-district. The purple is the neighborhood mixed-use subdistrict. And then there are 2 very commercial-oriented subdistricts, and they're in the red, orange, yellow here. So in the red, this is the commercial 3 or commercial 3.0, which is a reference to the maximum FAR on that block. So the minimum commercial requirement, which we'll get to in a moment, would apply to any projects in this subdistrict. The minimum commercial requirement also would apply to the 4.0 subdistrict, which we are sort of distinguishing between the 2 blocks, which do have some distinctive characteristics. So there's the western block and the eastern block. This is a diagram providing an overview of the proposed heights, maximums, and bonus heights. So starting on the eastern portion of the study area, we're proposing that the standard height be 50 feet, which is about 4 stories. With the potential maximum height at 75 feet, which is about 6 stories. So we're really sort of working within the new height precedents that have been established by the 40B development. And then the commercial 3, the maximum height is 88 feet, which is about 7 stories. And that maximum height is also mirrored in the transit-oriented mixed-use district across Boylston Street, with a step down to a maximum of 6 stories as you move northward up Hammond Street. The 4.0 district, these 2 blocks, the maximum height proposed is 150 feet, which is about 12 stories, with the potential for up to 175 feet or 14 stories if they meet certain commercial use requirements. And the 4.0, they're sort of buffered with these 88-foot maximum heights to help with the transition down to the neighboring areas. So again, 88 feet is about 7 stories. So that exists along Holly Lane, and on the western border, there's a pretty substantial setback of maximum 7 stories, and that's sort of in line with the existing height precedent in that part of the study area, which is 6 stories of the Citizens Bank building. This is an overview of all of the components in the zoning. There's a lot of similarity in terms of sort of the outline and the key components here in comparison to other special district overlays that the town has done, like Waldo Durgan or the Emerald Island Special District. But I did want to point out sort of a few newer tools that we've added to our zoning toolkit. Minimum commercial use requirement, we will talk about that in an upcoming slide. So this is a requirement that the town first utilized in the Brookline Housing Authority rezoning, and we are carrying that policy through to this proposed zoning overlay based on best practices outlined in the town's urban forestry. Another thing to note, so in the infrastructure and public safety improvement section, so we did undertake a transportation study to do an analysis of existing conditions and come up with a set of conceptual improvements to improve the capacity and the multimodal safety in the area. And so based on our understanding of the extent of the infrastructure improvements needed to improve multimodal safety in the Chestnut Hill commercial area, we have increased the standard minimum mitigation requirement from 1% of the hard construction costs, which has been sort of the standard identified in previous zoning overlays, and doubled that to 2% of the hard construction costs. We've also expanded the mitigation to include eligible mitigation to include public safety improvements in addition to the infrastructure upgrades. So the minimum commercial requirements, I will briefly talk about this. We can come back to this, and then the effective commercial formula that we've developed as well. So the minimum commercial requirement is applicable to the commercial-oriented subdistricts that I pointed out on the previous slide. And the requirement is that in order to utilize the overlay zoning in those subdistricts, you have to include at a minimum 51% of the gross floor area in your project proposal has to be for commercial uses. So this applies for the 3 as well as the 4. In the 4 sub-district, you're eligible to take advantage of the height bonus and go up to 14 stories if your proposal includes 60% or more commercial uses. So in calculating the, whether someone succeeded in meeting the minimum commercial threshold requirement, we have created a special formula that weights particular commercial uses that are more advantageous, either in terms of tax generation potential or aligning with the community needs and community preference. So we can talk more about that formula if you're interested, but that summary of how those weighted, the weight is applied, and then a little bit more information about, why those uses are preferred in terms of tax generation potential is summarized on this slide. The minimum, so the ground that exists in our general business zoning, that a minimum of 60% of the ground floor commercial needs to be activated, minimum of the ground floor needs to be activated with commercial space, a retail space. So this diagram indicates where that requirement applies. And so the red indicates where the commercial is required. We're really looking to maximize the ground floor presence on Boylston Street and sort of wrapping the corners of intersecting streets with Boylston with ground floor commercial, as well as Hammond Street. The yellow indicates areas where the ground floor commercial requirement applies, but there's the opportunity to seek a waiver if developers feel that they really aren't able to build out successful ground floor commercial space in those areas. And the blue indicates the portions of the study area that are exempt from the ground floor commercial activation requirement. So that's the length of Heath Street as well as Dunster Road. So just a quick tour of the sub-districts. So we have the neighborhood mixed-use sub-district. This is all the way on the eastern portion of the study area. The standard maximum height is that 4 stories. The renderings here, which were developed by our consultant Sasaki, who we've been working with to develop the design guidelines and help fine-tune some of the zoning. So these are representations of the neighborhood mixed-use area, both at the 4-story and as well as the 6-story level. So the eligibility for the 6-story height bonus would require that a minimum of 50% of the units in a proposal are affordable. And this recommendation or this incentive is sort of inspired by one of the conclusions from the Housing Advisory Board's Affordable Housing Overlay District Subcommittee, which had, suggested that this should be an incentive that the town should look to incorporate or experiment with going forward. So in the northern portion of the study area, this is the transit-oriented mixed-use sub-district. This portion of the study area is within 1,000 feet of the Green Line Chestnut Hill T-stop. So we're really looking to leverage that proximity to public transit. And we are anticipating, so the commercial uses are allowed broadly throughout the study area. I think we are also anticipating this area to be more ground floor retail activation with residential. The commercial 3.0, so one of the commercial oriented blocks, it provides sort of a transition in the level of density and height between the commercial 4.0 and the neighborhood mixed use district. The 4.0 sub-district, so this is the high impact economic development area. It includes the Chestnut Hill Office Park, and we're looking to allow larger, denser campus style development, with the trade-offs of being, we want higher percentage of commercial included in development proposals, and there are significant open space tree canopy requirements. And as we have talked about, the bonus going up to 14 stories is contingent upon having 60% or greater commercial uses in your proposal. So this is the 4.0 sub-district with the perspective from Heath Street. And this is just a slide summarizing the commercial and bonus requirements and how they're applied across the sub-districts. Design guidelines, another recommendation is the adoption of design guidelines that will help promote sort of a cohesive aesthetic and district-wide character. So this is a document that would be adopted by the planning board and would be used as sort of their main reference point and piece of review criteria as they receive applications for projects under this proposed zoning overlay. We had a presentation of the draft design guidelines to the planning board last week. We're going to have another follow-up workshop with the planning board tomorrow morning. So we're also recommending the town's pursuit of town protections in the form of memorandum of agreement and tax certainty agreement with City Realty. So as you know, as we were preparing to launch the study back in 2024, the Chestnut Hill Office Park was in the process of changing hands. And the newest owner, City Realty, has near-term redevelopment interests and has presented several iterations over the past year and a half. And their most recent proposal is summarized in this graphic on the right of the screen, which I'm happy to go and talk about in a bit more detail, but just for the broad strokes and related to the anticipated economic development of this proposal, which does conform to the zoning requirements that the town has laid out, it would include 420,000 square feet of commercial space, which would include a 200-room hotel, medical office, and retail space. There's approximately 250 residential units proposed, and the estimated net new commercial tax growth is 5.6 million. And so what we mean by net new commercial tax growth, that would be the anticipated estimated commercial tax or tax generation of this proposal minus what the property is currently contributing in terms of taxes, annual taxes, which is about $1.1 million a year. And then the estimated mitigation and public benefits, the total package comes to about $24 million. So as you're aware, we're still in the process of finalizing a memorandum of agreement with City Realty, but I think there's largely agreement on most of be able to share the full extent of the MOA more broadly. But I did want to include a slide just highlighting some of the key components of the MOA. So in terms of the infrastructure and public safety improvements, we are anticipating approximately $12 million. And these funds could be used for expenditures such as multimodal safety improvements, blue bike station, or a ladder truck and equipment for the fire department. City Realty and the Housing Advisory Board came to an agreement on a affordable housing trust contribution of $10.93 million as a cash in lieu payment for the condos that they are proposing. And then examples of other benefits would be publicly accessible level 3 EV charging stations, $150,000 for a signature public art installation in the Chestnut Hill commercial area, a $20,000 contribution to the town's public art maintenance fund. As the hotel launches and they have shuttle service, it would provide, it would be free to the public and providing access between the hotel and the T station. And they've agreed to partner with the sustainability division of the town on a couple of sustainability initiatives and pilot programs, one of which is a low carbon concrete installation pilot. And there will also be the opportunity for the town and for community groups to have access to the hotel conference space twice a year, free or at a nominal fee. Included in the MOA is also a tax certainty agreement. So the tax certainty agreement is significant to the town because, we're undertaking this rezoning effort in order to expand the commercial tax base. And so the tax certainty agreement sort of provides the ability to preserve the tax base once we've added this additional commercial space, and assures the town that, if the Chestnut Hill Office Park changes hands, subsequent owners would still be required to, even if they're a nonprofit and tax exempt institution, they'd still be required to pay the full amount of tax that the town is expecting to receive from that property in perpetuity. But not in perpetuity, sorry, it's a 95-year agreement. And transportation improvements, I mentioned earlier, we did undertake a transportation study, did an analysis of the existing conditions, and developed a set of sort of conceptual plans and improvements for the study area. I'm going to move through this section very quickly as well. But we did present the conceptual improvements to the Transportation Board back in December, and they adopted that as a planning document, meaning that these are projects that the town staff can continue to work through and develop, but give each of those project proposals appropriate amount of public input, engagement, and additional coordination with key stakeholders being Mass DOT, which has jurisdiction over Route 9, DCR, which controls Hammond Pond Parkway, and then the City of Newton. So as we've been working through the study process and particularly with the transportation study, we have had several meetings with Mass DOT and the city of Newton. And so we're very excited about sort of building off of that momentum and having the benefit of some conceptual plans and proposals to make those conversations a little bit more concrete with those important stakeholders. So we've proposed intersection improvements at several key intersections, and then a series of bike and pedestrian safety improvements as well. And so in terms of implementing the plan, there's still a lot of coordination required with key stakeholders that we just discussed. And, as projects are move further along in development and we have the mitigation funding, we want to be able to put that funding to use to continue to develop and implement the conceptual improvements that we've identified. And then I did also want to emphasize that, it's our understanding that City Realty will be required by Mass DOT to go through a MEPA process due to the trip generation and sort of the traffic impacts associated with their project. So that's just a process that we'll certainly keep tabs on and is expected to include infrastructure mitigation, which is reassuring for the town that we'll have that additional level of accountability and assurance about mitigation going forward. Commercial area vibrancy enhancements. This is an area like many of our other commercial areas that would benefit from, better branding, wayfinding system, streetscape public realm improvements like additional public art. And then also in order to realize these improvements and more importantly, make these improvements more sustainable in the long run, there should be sort of exploration of creating a public-private partnership through a business improvement district with the commercial property owners in the study area. And so these are some recommended next steps for implementation, and economic development would be responsible as sort of the project management lead in the implementation of these recommendations, and key internal partners, DPW, the Brookline Commission for the Arts, and then external partners. We've already discussed several of those. And when it comes to exploration of district management capacity, continuing to partner and keep the line of communication open with the commercial property owners will be critical. So again, just to provide a reminder of the direction and feedback that we're looking from the select board this evening, I just wanted to recap on this slide and invite Mike Sandman up if it's okay with the select board to provide some additional comments.
Can I ask a quick question before?
Sure.
Mike starts? While Mike's walking up. Is this a public hearing tonight?
No.
Okay.
Mhm.
And the reason why I ask, oh, wait. It's not a public hearing. It's just.
Thanks, Meredith. Hi, I'm Mike Sandman, Chair of the Community Advisory Group, and I think I'd like to say at the beginning that what you just saw gives you a sense of the thought and expertise that has gone into this. And we had just superb support and help from the staff on the Community Advisory Group, and we had a very good Community Advisory Group as well, very active and thoughtful group of people. One of the challenges we've heard to the zoning proposal in front of you is that it will change the character of all of Brookline. It's true that rezoning along Route 9 will enable increased density and taller buildings, but there are only 3 sites in Brookline that are suitable for this sort of substantially dense commercial development: the Chestnut Hill Office Park, Stop and Shop, and TJ Maxx, and both of those are locked up for years, decades perhaps. Development of those 3 sites won't change the overall character of the town, and if we don't enable commercial development in those few places where it's economically feasible, Brookline will change in a different way. It will become even more unaffordable. Most people who've been homeowners for more than a few years will tell you that if they were buying today, they couldn't afford Brookline. They add that their children won't be able to live here, and many of them are right. Brookline housing prices rose by 98% between 2005 and 2025. Median income rose by 14%. The middle class has been priced out, and now we're pricing out the upper middle class. One reason is our reliance on residential real estate taxes, and another is the failure to add new moderate cost housing. Through rezoning Chestnut Hill along Route 9, we can enable increased commercial tax revenue and have mixed-use development with additional housing. Just the Chestnut Hill Office Park site alone can yield a net annual increase in taxes approximately equal to the town's share of the override that you're considering. Additional development in the study area would bring additional net revenue, reducing the reliance on residential real estate taxes and residential taxpayers. Moreover, zoning can enable the creation of an enhanced commercial area, a new retail business district that will benefit the neighborhood and the entire town. Or we can continue to rely on residential real estate taxes, hope voters will pass increasingly large overrides, and continue to make Brookline less affordable. One way or another, Brookline will change. This zoning proposal gives us the opportunity to alter the direction of that change. Thank you.
Okay, Michael, you want to take the floor?
Sure.
Mhm.
And take a deep breath to start out, because that was
Mhm.
a wonderful presentation, and thank you. So first, I do want to thank Meredith and the entire planning team. Since the select board approved the Chestnut Hill Commercial Area Study on November 14th, 2023, this team has worked hard to realize the vision and achieve the goals established by the select board. I would also like to thank Mike Sandman and the Community Advisory Group for their collaboration, the Economic Development Advisory Board, the Planning Board, and especially the many community members who engaged throughout this process. Everyone contributed meaningfully to the result we are seeing today. The study report and the recommended warrant articles presented this evening lay out a clear vision for the Chestnut Hill commercial area. That vision grows directly out of the select board's original charge to incentivize new commercial tax growth while enhancing the livability and identity of the Chestnut Hill commercial area. The detailed requirements in the zoning overlay district will allow a vibrant mixed-use destination, one that can be thoughtfully developed over many years for the neighbors of Chestnut Hill, residents across Brookline, and visitors to our town. Implementing this vision also supports our ongoing conversations with the Mass DOT, the Massachusetts DCR, and the City of Newton. The recommended warrant articles also advance a significant component of that vision, redevelopment of Chestnut Hill Office Park. In addition to the positive fiscal impacts and public benefits described in the presentation, we can look forward to new businesses, homes, community spaces, and transportation infrastructure by developing this underutilized land. I want to highlight something distinctive about these recommendations. In the past, Brookline has articulated visions, sometimes without an economically viable project to demonstrate their feasibility. At other times, we have considered specific projects without a broader vision for the surrounding area. It is rare to have the opportunity to combine a clear vision with a concrete project. We are fortunate to be able to do so here. This vision and this project reinforce and strengthen each other. One point of broad consensus that emerged through this study is the significant opportunity for Brookline to enhance this area through redevelopment. Today's recommendations reflect this opportunity by carefully balancing the town's goals, community interests, and the requirements for economically viable development. This balance wasn't easy. Everyone involved can point to elements that they would change, and for good reason. In some cases, people made strong arguments for completely opposite suggestions. I want to appreciate the complexity of the trade-offs that have been weighed, as well as the facts on the ground that define a baseline for what is feasible. Together, this vision and these recommendations represent a rare opportunity, and I'm excited to see the community and town meeting engage deeply with their details in the months ahead.
Thank you, Michael. Any other select board members? Yeah, go ahead, Dan.
So I do have a question. If maybe we can go back to that slide about the 60% first floor commercial as a requirement for 14 stories. So if we don't get to that 60% commercial, how tall can the building be?
12 stories.
12 stories. Okay.
Are we
Paul?
doing Q&A at this point, or what process are we going through for? Q&A?
Asking questions or making
Okay.
comments
Mhm.
regarding the
So
presentation?
I have a process question for you and Chaz. So, Meredith had said at some point we would take a vote to
Right.
approve. I assume that's the approval to put it on the warrant and not necessarily making a recommendation about the article.
Correct.
Okay, so we have to go through a gate of deciding whether this is the proposal we'd like to put on the warrant.
Correct.
The select board needs to do that. Okay. So first, thanks, Meredith. I know that you guys have been working incredibly hard on this. I've got a couple of questions. I guess the first thing I'd like to ask is, how did the committee that helped you with this proposal vote? Was it a unanimous vote to bring this proposal forward, or was it divided?
So the committee, so as a staff-led community advisory group, there was no vote.
They didn't take a formal vote. Did you take a straw vote?
No.
So do we have a sense of the committee as to where they stand on this?
I think it's divided, sort of. I referred to the diversity of opinions, and I wouldn't say that there's broad consensus. And I would say that the proposed maximum heights in the 4.0 with the 12 and 14 stories are the driving force behind the opposition and anxiety.
Is the height of the 14 stories?
Yes.
Okay. I guess one of the concerns I have is how to get this thing through town meeting. You need a 2/3 vote. And the reason why I asked that question is I think I'm concerned that the number of town meeting members that may be on that committee that may not be supporting it could be concerning, given that this is what we have to get through town meeting, but I guess that's for another day. I think it's the OM, I forget the name. Could you put the map up that shows the zoning districts?
Sure.
I think there's a couple that that border Newton, right? So the one, oh, there you go. No, that one right there. Yeah. So the gray one that's on top, or the tan, is that included in the zoning package that we'll get?
Yes.
So have we, and I assume the other one, the yellow all the way down the end, those two are bordering Newton, correct?
Yes.
Have we worked with Newton? Have we reached out with their planning? Do they know what we're planning on doing there?
We have been in communications with Newton's planning department throughout the study process.
Yep.
There's been a significant turnover in the planning staff with the new mayoral administration.
Okay.
And so we have not reached out to the new planning staff with the status update about the project.
Okay. I'm going to ask the town administrator, who often does the relationships with our surrounding communities, wisdom of upzoning at least the top portion there that I think is next to Star Market without, some collaboration agreement from Newton. It's right on the border.
I will say the fact that we haven't talked to the new mayor doesn't mean we haven't been in regular communication with Newton over this. They know that this is happening. They know the contours of what we have been thinking about in terms of this process. And we have been working in partnership with them on this. I've
Yeah.
spoken to the new mayor. It's on our list. This is high on our list of things that we're talking about, not just this, but the overall development of
Yeah.
that area and Route 9 more generally is a priority for, I've related that it's a priority for the select board, and he has
Yeah.
agreed that it's a priority on his.
If we find that we're too far ahead of Newton, can we carve out that top piece and do it at a later date?
I would defer to Meredith and the team on that in terms of how this works in practice. But I think if we were too far ahead of Newton on this, we would hear from Newton.
Yeah.
Because they know that this is happening. But
Okay.
I'm happy to double check. But
It would be great to reach out proactively with Newton. I know it sounds like they've had turnover in their planning department, but I would be worried about getting too far ahead of Newton if they don't understand what we're doing. And unless it's absolutely necessary to do that piece, especially that piece up top. Certainly the yellow needs to be done, correct? Because that's part of what's being city's proposing, right? City Realty what City Realty is the yellow and the orange piece, right?
So City Realty, so this is the 4.0 sub-district.
Yeah.
East block, west block, and
Yeah.
then City Realty in the Chestnut Hill Office Park is this portion of the
Right.
west block.
Right. Okay. Yeah, again, I think it's really important that we have some support, acknowledgement from Newton that they know what we're doing and that they're not going to go cause grief for it. I get a couple, can I ask one more question? And then for the traffic mitigation, I know, I did have a brief conversation with Chaz, and I think we both agree that we're a little concerned about traffic.
Mhm.
The recommendation for traffic mitigation, has that been vetted with our transportation board?
So we're wrapping up the final stage of the transportation study where we're pressure testing the existing infrastructure and some potential alternative intersection configurations that we identified in the conceptual plans.
Okay,
So we're sort of waiting for the results of that, and that will be pressure tested under a sort of optimistic development scenario.
can you tell me what pressure tested means and what that would mean to me when you come back
Sure.
with the results?
So we understand we're adding a lot of additional density. It's
Yeah.
going to result in additional trip generation. What impact will that have on your ability to move through and around the area?
Yeah,
Are we going to be in total gridlock, or will the area still be able to function and absorb?
and you do know right now it is hellish to go through that area without the development.
Yes.
Okay. And then my last question is related to, maybe it's the memorandum of agreement. I know there was some outlines up there. What are the exits for City Realty? How can they, so our side of the bargain is zoning. We grant zoning, hopefully at town meeting, the zoning would happen. And we fulfill other obligations that we may have. What are the triggers that allow City Realty to say, we're out, we don't want to do this? Do we have a clear understanding of what those are?
I think Jonathan Simpson, I would defer to town council.
Is this an appropriate question to ask in public? I guess it's the first question I'd ask. Is
Yeah.
that okay?
no, Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So what are the outs? I mean, if someone proposes a change at town meeting, and that passes as an amendment, does city have the option to say, oh, that we don't want that, and they're out?
So I did see Jonathan Simpson recently.
Okay.
And I will stop.
Oh, I can't read his, is he typing?
Sorry, yes. So Jonathan
okay.
Simpson, First Assistant Town Council. Fundamentally, City Realty has the ultimate option to not build the project. We can't mandate that they build this project. All we can say is, if you want to take advantage of this zoning, you have to build this project and sign this agreement with the town. So that's the fundamentally, if they went belly up the day after town meeting, I don't know what would happen necessarily. Hopefully it would get transferred to an entity that would build the project, but that's first and foremost, is we can't make them build it. Second, in terms of, you mentioned amending the zoning. We're in the process of working out exactly what that's going to look like. Both sides to this arrangement, both the town and City Realty, need certainty, but we kind of needed it, and the way we achieve it, we have to be very specific on, because we don't want to. I am negotiating, and it's a red line for me that we can't tell town meetings that they've agreed to be bound by this deal and then have that not be true. But at the same time, City Realty can't agree to be bound by the deal and then get zoning that they didn't plan on.
Yeah.
So there's a few very specific circumstances that we're trying to deal with. One of them is what happens if there's an amendment to the proposed zoning.
Yeah.
We're still working out the details there. The other one that has come up in the course of negotiations is what happens if, because since we're a town, we have to run all of our bylaw amendments, including our zoning amendments, through the Attorney General's office. And that's a third party that through statute just has the ability to strike sections of our zoning. There will be a provision in the agreement that if the Attorney General does into the zoning after it passes, that City Realty will be able to walk away if it makes the project no longer work for them. But I think the chances of that are extremely low, simply because it's not something. There's nothing in this zoning that that would run afoul of the normal issues that the Attorney General takes with things that we amend our bylaw to do. And then above and beyond that, I've already approached the municipal law unit with some questions about what we're doing, just to make absolutely sure there's not going to be any surprises.
Thank you, Jonathan. And just one quick follow-up question. If, is there a performance time frame in this? So let's say that the zoning is passed by town meeting as put forward without any changes. If something happens, if there's a group that sues, if there's other hurdles that are put in front of this, does the agreement expire? What's the time? Is there a time frame that this has to be done by?
There is, but the exact length of it is under negotiation. But the concept is that if this is held up for a significant amount of time, we're talking many years, multiple years, that that there will come a point where City Realty would be able to essentially walk away, because at that point we'd kind of be in a new. Both parties recognize that, you know, in 2036 rather than 2026, it would just be a very different situation. The numbers wouldn't work out the same. The value of the various uses wouldn't be the same. So we're not sure when exactly that date will be. We're still negotiating that, but there will be a point. But the hope is that it will be a date that, if everything goes according to plan, we'd never get even close to that. They would have everything they needed, because critically that date only comes about if there's, like you said, Paul, if there's an appeal, or they're still waiting on something. If all that is, if the only thing we're waiting on is City Realty to get off its, you know what, and start building, that's not grounds to get out of the.
Right. But I mean, as you said, we can't control things we can't control. Thank you, Jonathan.
Yeah, so a question about the East Block. So the East Block is owned by growth companies, correct?
They own a majority of the properties in the East
A
Block.
majority of it. So some concern I've heard is that if this zoning passes, which covers the entirety of this Route 9 stretch down to Hammond, essentially, what happens if the other owners are not really on board with a project of this scope? So if we just have the City Realty portion that's built, that would create quite a bit of contrast with the adjacent parcels. So to what extent is there outreach being made to some of these other owners so that there's some kind of coherence to how the development looks at a macro level?
Certainly. So we have been in communication with growth companies as well throughout this process. They participated in almost all of the EDAB subcommittee meetings, where there was a lot of back and forth between subcommittee members and City Realty, as well as growth companies and members of the public who attended. You know, we've tried to accommodate growth companies, you know, based on our understanding of sort of what their constraints and pain points are in terms of being able to move forward with redevelopment. And I, you know, to the fullest extent we're able to, we've tried to make those accommodations in the zoning. And then in terms of, you know, outreach to other property owners, there was a package. I'm just going to stop there, but yeah, so.
John.
I just want to warn everyone that Barbara and I own the first house we owned in Brookline was on East Street, right at the edge of these parcels. As you go a little bit further west from what was visible on the map that was shown during this presentation, this excellent presentation, that's where our house was. You know, extremely modest, and there is a neighborhood that we were part of that I think would surprise a lot of people. It's as modest, but at the same time changing a little bit in the direction of me because of all the changes in local real estate over the years. What was a modest neighborhood is now a neighborhood where houses sometimes, you know, can sell for $1 million or more. But it's a working class neighborhood. It's a neighborhood, and maybe to a certain extent still today, had people like firefighters, police, a custodian who lived next door to us. So there's a lot to learn about Brookline from the history of this particular section of our town, which is the furthest west section of our town. And a lot of people in Brookline don't really know that much about it. But it's an amazing section of Brookline. And the people who to this day live on that section of Heath Street. That's the primary sort of residential part of all of this. They have been watching all of this very, very closely, and they have quite a stake in all of this. And what we face in terms of taking something to town meeting is this balance between respecting the history of that neighborhood and the reality of the neighborhood in the present day, and the people who live there, and at the same time respecting Brookline's need for commercial revenues, commercial development revenues. And so we have an owner who happens to have seen an opportunity in purchasing the portion of the map that is in the bright yellow and furthest to the west. And I think I recollect correctly, they paid about $40 million for it. And they need to make a return on their investment. The people who are the long-term residential neighborhood residents of this area, they want to sort of have a return on their investment in terms of they don't want their neighborhood to suddenly become less desirable to them. They don't want it to become less desirable to people in the future. And they love their neighborhood. So, you know, they kind of want to protect it as much as they can, protect it from too much generation of traffic, too much, you know, in a couple instances, maybe, you know, overwhelming shadows or, you know, building heights that suddenly, you know, make everybody else feel kind of small. So there's a lot at stake. And then it, as Meredith has very carefully pointed out, it isn't just the portion that is, you know, at the heart of the Chestnut Hill West Study Group's work. It's this entire portion for which we don't presently have, you know, people who have clear interests and a clear plan as to what they would like to do with their property ownership going all the way in the direction of Hammond Street. And then we have that peculiar parcel on the other side of Boylston Street, which I will explain to people right now in case they don't already know this. There's a Chestnut Hill there's a golf station there. We all call it the Chestnut Hill Golf Station. There's a CVS there, and there's parking for the people accessing the golf station, and also for the people going to the CVS. And then right next to that is this, you know, huge expanse of parking for the Star Market. That's the thing that's the next to that. In my experience, having worked as chair of the Lower Boylston Street Study Committee that looked at the zoning of Lower Boylston Street and the potential on Lower Boylston Street for there to be some dramatic change in development, when there are owners like CVS and Gulf Oil, they have long-term leases. So are we looking at a parcel and trying to figure out how to rezone it when there's actually people who own it who probably have no interest in abandoning the properties to some other alternative development?
So we did speak with CVS and WS Development, which owns a couple of the Star Market parking lot, and they own a couple of the properties, the 2-3 family houses in the northernmost point of the study area. Yes, so our understanding is that, you know, there's no near-term redevelopment interest, but I think this study is a combination of sort of how the town has approached rezoning opportunities in response to development interests, as well as, you know, moving forward with establishing a vision and a planning framework for the commercial area surrounding that development opportunity as well.
Mm-hmm.
So you are correct. I don't think that there's the potential for near-term redevelopment of the CVS site, but I still think it is an important opportunity for the town to clearly establish a set of expectations around what we would like to see there in alignment with our vision for the Chestnut Hill commercial area.
Well, you know, if that were to become sort of a hang up of trying to get this through town meeting, I just wonder how much, you know, result we could get from the rezoning, given the long-term lease situations there. But, you know, that's not my main point. It's just an example of, you know, the many sort of complex pieces that we're looking at. If I may, I'm just going to start at Hammond Street and sort of work my way west to also try to paint a picture for people of how really interesting this neighborhood is and how really complicated it might be to plan what it is today versus what we would like it to be in the future. So, you've got shallow commercial lots facing, let's start with the section that is immediately adjacent to Hammond Street. Shallow commercial lots, a bank, former bank building that has been empty, for quite some time. I think a second former bank building that has been empty quite some time, which is maybe going to become a veterinary office or something like that. I forget what it was. You've got a daycare center. You've got a whole series of basically single-story commercial spaces, kind of shallow.
Mhm.
And behind them, you have people in traditional triple deckers and, maybe double decker. But you also have an auto body shop that a lot of people use. So it's peculiar. It's a weird mix. Is the vision that that if you take, for example, the development that's going up just to the east, which is a 6-story, I think it's a age-restricted housing complex with commercial on the ground floor. Is that kind of what we want to see move down, to the west progressively through this rezoning? I'm just trying to get people to envision what this might mean.
So we are looking to incentivize site assembly. And I think not exactly in the form of 1180 Boylston, but it has established a new height precedent and level of density on a prominent location in the area. So I think the answer is yes.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. And I don't think that, I'm not saying that that would be a bad thing. I think people just need something they can picture, And then you also have a 40B project, which is well underway, or at least it was well underway in terms of, the presentation of the plans and so on. And that would be at the corner of Hammond and Heath, and what they call Heath and Sheaf. Where does that stand right now? Because that's a lot like the one that is the 6-story, it wouldn't necessarily be age restricted, I'm quite sure, but it would be sort of the same height, mostly residential, maybe a little bit of commercial on the street facing first floor.
So I might look over my shoulder to their legal representation, but my understanding is that they received their comprehensive permit. It is now under litigation. And the intention is that they would like to obtain their comprehensive permit for that 40B. However, that property owner has also been watching the development of the Chestnut Hill commercial area study and the zoning recommendations closely, and is very interested to see what opportunities might exist for them as an alternative.
Interesting. But under the envisioned zoning, to the other side of Sheaf Street. So now you're looking at the block between Sheaf and Hammond, which is a block away from the block facing Boylston Street. Would that, potentially become just like the proposed development at the corner of Heath and Hammond, basically 5 to 6 stories, development above commercial, maybe office development, but I doubt it. Probably residential development.
Just a confirmation question. Are you talking about the block on between Boylston and Sheaf Street and?
No,
Hammond
I'm
and
talking
Holly?
about the block between Sheaf Street and Heath.
You're
Leading up
saying
to Holly.
remainder of the.
Leading up to Holly.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So that would be part of the neighborhood mixed use, and that would be standard 4-story height unless they meet the
4-story height.
affordable.
Okay.
Unless they meet the affordable, more than 50% affordable units, then they would be eligible to go to 6 stories, or if it's a proposed hotel use, that would also be eligible for the height
Okay.
bonus.
And so then we get to the whole portion from Holly to Tully.
Mhm.
And if what is envisioned for Chestnut Hill West ends up being approved, ends up eventually being developed, could we eventually see the whole area between Holly and Tully become what that is? Is that the long-term vision for all of this zoning?
So the Holly to Tully block is part of the 4.0. It's the eastern block of the 4.0.
Yeah.
Where there would be eligible for the 12-story maximum height, potentially 14-story if they could get to 60% commercial. I will say it will be very, very challenging for developers to get to 60% commercial. I think City Realty is in a position to do it because of the hotel component, but otherwise I think it's going to be a tall order.
Mm-hmm. But when we do these rezonings, we do want people to capitalize on them, right? So I mean,
Certainly.
it's kind of a contradiction in that statement, I think.
So My understanding is, well, point taken.
Okay, yeah, okay. I mean, and we're not quite there yet, or maybe we are there yet. I mean, we're talking about rezoning for the entire area.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the question is, is there disagreement about the requirement for the 4.0 East Block to also have the minimum 51% commercial requirement? I think conversations with the EDAB subcommittee identified that as an appropriate requirement for that property, given interest in site assembly. So we could be talking about some potentially deeper parcels. And, the 3.0 was also something that the EDAB subcommittee identified as inappropriate for a more commercial forward development because of its frontage on Boylston Street.
Okay. I promise I will kind of wrap up my part of this tonight. But I do have kind of the bottom line question here. I think what is behind discussions like this one tonight and all of the discussions that took place with the Chestnut Hill study group, and every time we face one of these development proposals, is this kind of a dance, between, yeah, we need development, but maybe not so much residential as commercial, or maybe not so much commercial as residential. That goes back and forth all the time. We need to take properties that have like a certain amount of tax generation right now, and we want to maybe double that, or triple that, or quadruple that. So we're open to developers who want to go big, and if they say, hey, given what I spent for this land, I would need you to go to 12 stories or 14 stories, and I would need this and I would need that. And we kind of want to sort of keep that conversation going. But if they say, if you don't give me 14 stories, it's not feasible, they love to say it doesn't pencil out. How are we to know that that's really true? And how are we to know that we could have actually gotten a very acceptable level of development at less than 14 stories in terms of its tax generation and in terms of its payback to the developer? But how do we know if they're bluffing when they say they need 14 stories or it's game over?
Is that a rhetorical?
Oh, I think we need to answer questions like
So-
that.
Isn't there a straightforward answer?
There is. So one of the reasons why we had the Economic Development Advisory Board involved in so many meetings is that these people are development experts and understand sort of economic viability, whether it's housing or commercial development, people who are in the business now, who've been in the business over many years.
Michael, sorry, could you move your microphone a little closer?
Sorry.
That's okay.
And in addition to the minimum commercial percentage that they have talked about and, has been part of the negotiations over and the consideration of trade-offs as we developed, as the planning department has developed the zoning, there's also this question of FAR, right? And one of the reasons why we have an FAR of 4 and in that area is to allow for some sufficient commercial development. When EDAB met in April, I believe, they actually recommended an FAR of 5 for this area. And through the process of the negotiation and the other benefits that we have incorporated in the zoning, the open space requirements, the community gathering space requirements, the internal circulation agreement, the setbacks, the significant setbacks from the western border, which was a significant concession to the neighborhood. All of those issues, combined with EDAB's understanding of what was a legitimate amount of density, led to the design that ultimately led to the height established within the zoning. So all of these things, in terms of your question of like, is it really true that 14 stories is necessary? We're relying we're relying on our experts in EDAP.
Yeah.
And we're also relying a little bit on the analysis that was done by RKG Associates when they were doing net fiscal impact,
Mhm.
because they were also looking at questions of like what would actually be built, how would it generate revenue, so the planning staff had the opportunity to look at that information as well.
Okay, but I need to make the question a little bit harder. Well, I think that's
please.
why we're here.
Yeah.
So
wonder
there's
if
a
I could-
story in the
wonder if I could
Globe
help,
just,
uh,
what? Is,
I
am
wonder if I
I
could-
being interrupted? Sorry.
I hate to interrupt you, but I wonder if I could help as a tag on to Michael's.
Well, why don't you let me finish the follow-up question? Okay, if
Yeah.
that's all right. The follow-up question is, and I'm going to cite that there was a story in the Globe just last couple of days about a developer who hugely overpaid for a property in Cambridge, and now is left holding the bag to the tune of like they're going to have to put it on the market in a sort of fire sale at about a third or a quarter of what they paid for it just a couple of years ago. How are we to know, given the vicissitudes of the office market and the real estate market in general in this area, and interest rates and all those other factors, maybe this is a case of somebody overpaid. So do we have to make the zoning enough to generate a profit for someone who overpaid for the property, given the circumstances of the market these days?
Yeah, Michael?
So, well, let me answer that. That's a little different question that I was going to answer, but
Well,
I'll,
maybe you're glad you let me finish.
well, yes, I suppose so. The assessor's office in Brookline, we talked with the assessor, and the amount that was paid for that property appeared to be an appropriate amount based on what was the then current market. We don't know what the future will hold. I believe that the property that you were talking about, however, was going to be built out for lab space. And there's no question that the lab space market has collapsed basically because there's it was a substantial amount of
I
overbuilding.
think it was office, but go ahead. Yeah.
Or if it was commercial office, I think the
Yeah.
same thing apply. But that's not what we're looking for and that's not what City Realty is looking for. Let me come back to the question that you asked about whether they need 14 stories or not. And the answer is really no. Nobody needs 14 stories. What they need is a certain number of square feet that will produce for them a certain number of dollars per square foot of income. And you could take that 14-story building this high, squeeze it down, but in order to get the square footage that you need, it's going to bulge out. If it bulges out, it basically takes up the space that we've been asked by the neighborhood and we feel ourselves, that is a staff and I think the community advisory who feels themselves is appropriate for making attractive public space. One of the things that City Realty has done is agreed to not put any traffic at all, no exit from their site onto Heath Street. That means that all of the circulation within that site has to be on roadways in the site. That takes up space. We have a large public plaza between two of the buildings that have been proposed. If you squeeze that building down and it bulges out, you squeeze down their ability to put that traffic on a roadway, and you squeeze out the public, that large public space. So do you need 14 stories? No, what you need is 14 stories if you also want all of the other attributes that are built into that plan, and therefore that we have tried to zone for.
May I just end with one last question? And that is, since we've crunched all the numbers and that's the conclusion we've come to, within that number crunching, what level of profit are we allowing the developer?
We don't have that answer. I think okay, so the question about why 12 stories and then the 14-story for the bonus, I think one consideration is sort of the acknowledgement that once you go beyond 7 stories, there's a change in building code requirements. In construction, you have to go to steel frame construction. It gets much more expensive. So in order to acknowledge sort of the economies of scale, if you're going to go beyond 7 stories, developers are really going to want to go to 12. So that's sort of like a standard rule of thumb and definitely was often cited in our discussions with the EDAB subcommittee. So, the task was to create compelling incentives for net new commercial tax growth. So we could have landed on 10 stories, but in terms of what we were charged with, I don't think that would have been a compelling incentive. And also another consideration is that if we're reducing the total amount of square footage and the size of this development in, the 4.0 area that would lend itself to larger scale development, we're also depriving the town of additional commercial tax revenue within that. So, there's a lot of complexities. It's not quite as simple as, you can push the building down and it goes out because there are standard floor plate sizes. There's a point at which it just all falls apart. It's like you can't take off 1 or 2 stories. The project no longer pencils out. So I do feel that I am encouraged that within the zoning parameters that we've landed on, City Realty was able to include the hotel, which is very important for the tax generation potential, but then also the medical office piece. I think we shouldn't just, settle for the hotel use. We should really try to maximize the potential that this site and the 4.0 subdistrict can contribute to the expansion and diversification of the commercial tax base.
Thank you for the answer.
Okay, Paul?
Thank you. I was hoping I could invite the City Realty representative up and ask a question.
Paul?
I have a question for him. He's here.
Yeah, why would we not?
Well, no, I guess I'm a little concerned that you're saying you're going to invite him up.
Well, I'm saying I'd like to ask him a question.
Okay.
Would you like to invite him up?
Well, he has through the chair.
Through the chair. Bernard, could you please invite the City Realty representative up? I have a question for him.
I'm so sorry, just before I lose the thought, and then in response to John's question about sort of, are we making the developer whole through this zoning? This has definitely been a question and a theme that's come out through the community engagement process. EDAB subcommittee did do a level of analysis that kind of debunks that proposal. I can follow up with sort of their analysis to the select board just to resolve that question.
I'm sorry, debunks what?
The notion that based on our understanding of the other bids and what City Realty ended up paying based on the next highest bid, it does not make a substantial amount of difference in terms of the level of development a developer would want out of this site, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, City Realty, come on up. Come
Thank you.
on down.
Thank you, Chair. Bree.
Hey everyone,
Introduce yourself, please.
Cliff Kensington, representing City Realty, owner of the Chestnut Hill Office Park site.
And Jennifer DePazzo, Gilbert Council.
We know you.
So first, I appreciate you coming up and the chair indulging me. First, I want to thank you for the amount of time and effort that you've put into this. As your attorney will attest, we are not the easiest municipality to do business with. It is hard. I think that hardness comes over protecting something that many residents and town meeting members and public officials believe is a very special place. So just know that I think that's where it's coming from. But in the conversations that I've had with people calling me, and again, know that there's a lot of suspicion with change. It's just the nature of it. I know the answer to this question, but I do want to give you an opportunity to state it. How committed are you, City Realty, to building this project to completion versus the zoning coming and then it gets sold to someone else and we're dealing with somebody else?
I mean, we're certainly very committed to being a part of it. I can't tell you that we are going to be the only partners in it. It would require a very large capital infusion that is not within our balance sheet to just build it. We will certainly need lenders and potentially equity partners, if not development partners, but it is absolutely our goal to be a part of it and shepherd this through the whole process, certainly.
Okay, I mean, that is helpful to hear because the fear that I've heard from some folks is that this is just going to get flipped and we're going to be completely dealing with somebody else. And I realize who knows what you can predict, and your attorney may say you can't commit, but I think it's important that we know who we're going to be doing business with and partnering with primarily to see this thing through. I think it's important. And what I'm hearing is you're committed to seeing this project through. You may take on others to help, sounds like, but you're committed to being,
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're long-term people, we're local. We don't, this is as far west as we get on any project. Everything we do is Boston. We're, this is where we want to be. We don't do anywhere else in the country.
okay,
Okay, David?
thank you.
So a question I have, I've heard a lot from members of the public who talk about your broader portfolio and City Realty's experience with mixed-use development.
Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit more about your mixed-use developments and some of your other properties? I know, for example, you've a property in Quincy and you've got various ones in Boston. Can you talk about some of those?
Yeah, I would say that over the lifespan of our company, we've certainly tried to track the market. I usually tell people that, because we are so geographically focused in this area, we're more geography focused than we are asset class focused. So that has led to us to kind of go through different phases depending on opportunities in the market. We've kind of always done a lot of residential, which is both kind of apartment and condominium projects of various scales. We've done from all the way down to single families up to, multi, large scale apartment buildings. We've done, in more recent years, as kind of market forces have shifted, we've done a lot of restaurant and hospitality, including restaurant space in this study area, particularly as that market kind of dipped. We also have been picking up a lot of existing office building and retail spaces in recent years, and those have been a lot more larger scale existing office building, both in the city and in the suburbs. And then we've been, over the last 5 to 6 years, really focusing on the hotel side of the business. So and kind of permitting and designing a number of hotels, some of which are in process now, none of which have opened yet. So I would say part of the reason why, on a project like this, we would certainly look toward potential expertise partners, depending on the certain, where appropriate, on it's things that we have done a lot ourselves. We would certainly look to own it and manage it ourselves, but where necessary, there's a lot of opportunities to bring in dedicated partners. Luxury hotels is a very unique business that we, where if we can, we would absolutely love to have someone who's done dozens all over the world be a part of the team. Or for medical office, that often, especially at the large scale or at an institutional tenant level, requires different expertise that we would certainly look to bring on to be part of the process. So I think that's part of why, we thought the phasing was important. We thought having different buildings as opposed to having, one gigantic building that included a bunch of different uses. We wanted the opportunity to kind of keep, execute these things to the best of their abilities. And I think that's reflected in the version of the project we have now.
I just want to add that the two principals of City Realty, one lives in Brookline and one lives in Newton, and they do an extensive philanthropic work throughout Brookline as well. So I just wanted to add that.
Okay, David?
In terms of the commercial mix that you are visualizing, so part of this presentation indicated that one of the goals would be to create another commercial district, essentially. I think that people in the neighborhood and also townwide or Metro Boston would be curious to know, how far along are you in discussions with potential commercial partners for the hotel, for retail, for restaurants?
There's been a lot of discussions, both, kind of cold outreach to us, as well as, us in discussions with a lot of people who've done work in the area. I will say that, there is certainly a number of which who are hesitant to provide any more detail, given where things are in the zoning. There's definitely a level of, okay, talk to me when the zoning actually allows what you're saying you can do. No one really wants to dedicate a lot of time and resources to fleshing out a proposal on something that's not even currently allowed to be built. So there's been a lot of preliminary discussions, but we're hoping that, as soon as we kind of progress things forward and we have some tangible approvals, that we can transition all these preliminary conversations into a more detailed, LOI process, more detailed, bring them on as part of the design, more detailed design process and special permit process. So absolutely a lot of interest, but what form that takes, I think we'll need a little more progress.
Well, let me just answer that in a little bit of a shorter answer. There's a lot of interest, but nobody really wants to talk about it until they see the zoning that's passed.
And I can
So,
understand
yeah.
the reticence to get into specifics. I'm not asking
Yeah.
specific names.
No.
But could we maybe have categories or some kind of assurance that the zoning as it's being proposed will be compatible with some of the interest that you are drawing?
Absolutely. Certainly hotel interest and certainly medical office interest and the residential cells itself. You want to add to that?
Yeah, and I would just say that a lot of the design decisions and the exact shape of the project has driven, wanting to target some of the desired outcomes, and particularly on the retail side, there's a very delicate balance that must be struck to kind of have successful retail. So, as Mike Sandman was talking, minimum widths of that plaza to actually allow for retail activation of that plaza is something we've been trying to guard, because if you squeeze it too much, suddenly it becomes not a nice place to be and no retail tenants want to be there. Things like the parking like the vehicular circulation, frontage, signage, all of these, we've kind of can show that we want to make sure that it becomes the vibrant retail environment. And even just having a certain amount of retail, having kind of one-off 3,000 or 4,000 square foot spaces on their own in isolation are not going to be successful retail areas. You need a density, you need a district almost of retail in order for any one retailer to want to get involved. So we've certainly heard interest, but also we have been designing a lot of these kind of feedback we've been giving and kind of lines we've been holding on certain dimensional aspects of the design has been to maximize the success of these commercial elements, which, as many pointed out, is the more challenging part, is the thing that has to be done right in order to be successful.
And if I might just ask about the outdoor component. So we've heard that there's interest in an outdoor component. I'm a little curious about that because, I mean, this is right on a highway. I'm not sure how many people really want to be outside right on a highway. So what is really the driving force behind having outdoor space as opposed to what Mike Salmon was talking about of sort of having a shorter building that bulges out a bit more?
Well, I think that's kind of been through the different variations of our has been to have an outdoor component, but to provide some level of protection from the highway. Originally, we had more of a horizontal scheme of the buildings that were kind of ran parallel to the street with an internal with an retail corridor. And through the advisory and the process and feedback, there was expressed a desire to reorient because they wanted more vertical connections between Heath Street and Boylston Street. So we changed that, but to compensate for some of the things you're talking about, we have set the buildings further back from Boylston Street. We've introduced some landscape screening in our plans, and certainly, it's visible and it is connected to both roadways, but the experience within it will be much more muted even than something like the street, which has a large portion of outdoor components on Boylston Street. I think will be farther away and even better screened than they are, but it's been very successful for them as well.
But doesn't that also create the problem of visibility of the retail that's there?
Yeah.
If you're screened off, how do people know it's there?
So that's on the flip side, is one, we certainly know that some internal spaces, I think, will command lower rents, but I think they can be smaller spaces that can attract a different tenant pool. But it's also why one of our early things has been the importance of signage and having some level of flexibility in a kind of shared signage on Route 9, so the retailers who don't have visibility for their space still have visibility, signage visibility on Route 9, which is really going to be a major demand of anyone looking to move into the space.
And sorry, last question. I know I'm asking a lot, but these are important. Medical offices, I'm not sure really get people excited.
Sure.
I understand that the market's vibrant for that. That's fine. But my understanding is that there's nothing in this zoning that would preclude uses that are different from medical office space. So in theory, if there were some kind of retail potential tenant that came to you and said, we really want to have X space, that would still potentially be viable, correct?
Meaning
Meaning under the zoning, it would be allowable, I should say.
Yeah, certainly but I mean, retail above the first couple of floors is very rare and it would be very difficult to pull off. So You know, we were certainly hoping for in one of the buildings to have at least 2 levels of retail and then medical office on the upper floors. I think any kind of use of, once you get above the 3rd or 4th floor, it's going to be medical office or traditional office versus retail.
Well, just as an example, so right across the street, there's Legal Seafood on a 2nd floor, the Container Store on a 2nd floor.
Yeah.
So it doesn't seem impossible.
No, so we do have a 2nd floor retail
Right.
in our current plan on one of the buildings. So we are certainly hoping for that and trying to maximize the amount of retail space we can where it is possible. But above the 2nd floor, we just do not think it's possible. So we've shifted our plans accordingly.
I had one more
Yeah,
important,
John.
I think is an important question. How, I think it's a question for Jonathan Simpson, but others may weigh in, of course. While all of this is going on, and, you know, it could stretch on for, you know, another year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years before we actually see, you know, the development, much less completion of all the development there. How do we protect ourselves from any piece of this being sold off to a nonprofit?
So in terms of the biggest, but the protection that we are most concerned about when it comes to being sold to a nonprofit is the fact that nonprofits have utilized other special districts like this one, is that there is a tax certainty agreement. It was mentioned in Meredith's presentation. One of the warrant articles will authorize you to execute that, as well as the memorandum of agreement. And with it, the City Realty and their successors and assigns are agreeing to, if they ever transfer the property to a tax exempt entity, that entity is agreeing to pay the difference in taxes. So the town's revenue will stay the same. Because this also contains a hotel use, it has an additional clause specific to this agreement that serves the taxes that the town gets from the hotel use, the excise taxes, so that that use is ever changed, or if it is somehow a nonprofit hotel, that tax revenue will also remain level. They'll simply be agreeing to pay it to pay it in lieu of taxes effectively, and that is binding on not just city, but anyone city sells the property to. It actually
And for
has
how
to-
long, Jonathan?
It's for the maximum time allowed, which would be 95 years.
Ooh, that's a
Um,
good one. Yeah.
Yeah, although under the law, we are responsible for renewing that agreement periodically, 30 and then 25, 25, 25. So there is excuse me, I forget how it adds up, but it's in the statute. But yes, so we track those, and we haven't had to yet, but we track those, and we fully intend to renew them as necessary.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. One point that John raised earlier, I'm not sure it was answered. You questioned whether city had overpaid for the site at 40 million, and it's actually assessed at 65 million.
Oh, I know, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, yeah, but that's why I mentioned things have changed so much. I mean, a lot of properties that were assessed at 65 million are no longer assessed at 65 million. And, you know, some of them are assessed at half. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Meredith, you want to conclude or send us on our way?
So just to come back to the bookend slides in terms of next steps and the feedback that we were seeking.
There it is.
And can we talk a little bit about deadlines? So the warrant closes the end of the month.
February 25th.
February 25th. So you are meeting throughout this month. And I think the question on our end is, there are still additional process to go through before these articles are finalized. There are things that are still being negotiated, finalized, et cetera, hammered down. As that process progresses, would you like to, for example, hold a public hearing? Would you like to, or is there specific information you would like? What can we do to get you the information you need to feel comfortable making a decision on these 3 items.
Well, Paul, you have
I was gonna-
thoughts?
He asked the question, I was going to offer some thoughts. So yeah, 3 things. One, it would be helpful to have the traffic mitigation plan somehow vetted. Maybe put that in front of the transportation board and let them do their thing. It would just be helpful to have another set of eyes on it versus just the people that did the work, to check it. There's a lot of questions about commercial viability and how the mechanics of this zoning affect height and profitability and all that. I know there was a subcommittee that from EDAB that worked on it. It'd be great to have them here, some of them, or one of them, or a couple of them, just to ask questions. John had raised a lot of questions, I think, that were valid, that maybe, and I know the committee has answers, but it'd be great to hear directly from them. And then the third thing, I do think it would be a good idea to have a public hearing as part of the process of putting it on the warrant. So it would be really great to hear from folks before we actually vote to put it on the warrant.
Well, no, David.
So I agree with Paul's suggestions. I would add, there's a question John asked that I thought was quite salient that I'd like some more clarity around. Well, all of your questions, but this one in particular stuck out of my mind, which was when we talk about this pencils out, this doesn't pencil out. I think you're right that we could use a better understanding of pencils out for whom? For sort of your average project, or pencils out specifically for a particular developer, pencils out for a particular parcel. And I appreciate Meredith's explanation around how if you need to go over 7 stories, you really need 12 because of the change in the building code. But I think that there are some other elements that go into that. Specifically, how much profit are we targeting here when we say that we need X amount of square footage or Y number of stories? And I think that's important to know, not so much because I don't want City Realty to be successful. I want City Realty to do well, and I want the town to do well, of course. But these are very important policy considerations that we are making. And if we are working off an assumption that the developer's profit margin needs to be Z level, and maybe it doesn't really have to be in terms of from a town interest perspective, we need to know what those trade-offs are so that any proposed refinements can be dealt with accordingly. And then with regard to potential refinements, I think it would be helpful to know, perhaps from City Realty, whether sort of last minute adjustments to building height could be executed prior to this May. Now, I know that a lot of work goes into these designs, and I greatly appreciate how much time you've spent on all this. But I think that ultimately success at town meeting is going to come down to the building heights. And the neighborhood is really uncomfortable with 12 to 14 stories. I think they're fine with the 7. Even the 7 was a bit of a stretch because there's really nothing around there. That's, I mean, 1180 is going to be 6, but for the most part, that stretch is mostly 1 and 2 stories. So this would be a dramatic change. I do think the neighborhood understands that change is inevitable and that it's important for revenue growth and for trying to ease the residential tax burden to some extent. But 14 is a dramatic shift. And I think if there could be even a slight modification downward a bit, we would get more people on board. So to the extent that there is the possibility of a slight bulge out somewhere without derailing the entire process, I think that would also be worth knowing.
May I weigh in?
Yep.
Just, I agree with Paul. I think we should have a hearing. And as one element of the hearing, I do think we should, offer an opportunity to the advisory group to give us a sense of their consensus on this. Because it's a peculiar feature of this advisory group that they were not formed for the purpose of taking a vote. And so they haven't taken a vote, but it can't hurt to hear from them and to get a sense of what their consensus is on this.
Okay,
Okay.
we'll,
Can I,
yeah,
can I just ask for a little clarification on that? Because because this was a staff-led project and the community advisory group certainly has multiple voices. Are you looking for a sort of representation from every community advisory group member? Because, different community group members have different.
No, but how many people are on the advisory group?
Well,
10.
you said list,
I think
10?
or 11?
I think 10.
So if 10 show up and each one wants to speak for a brief period of time, I don't see what the harm is.
Well, they can, I'm sorry.
go ahead.
So I think if we hold a public hearing, any one of them can come and
Right.
speak if they want to.
Or
I-
all of them.
But here's, with Michael's help and others, we did do something that was very hard at town meeting with the MBTA Communities Act.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And this is similar. This might be harder.
Yeah.
And it potentially could be harder than the MBTA Communities Act. And I think, David, and by the way, I'm not representing anybody. No one has said this to me. So I'm going to speak out loud for a moment, which is sometimes scary, but I'm going to. 2/3 is a very high bar. It's a hurdle at town meeting. And it is very difficult to overcome without strong, broad consensus. And I think, and the reason why I asked earlier, and John just reiterated, like, where does the committee stand? It is important to have the support of the committee, and a divided committee is not great for trying to get something passed for 2/3 vote at town meeting. And I think we need to be sensitive to that. My understanding is that it potentially has been a divided committee, although there wasn't a formal vote or a straw vote. And unfortunately, I think the folks that have not been very supportive, for a whole bunch of reasons, have influence at town meeting. And I worry about getting a 2/3 vote. David alluded to the fact is, what if there is a change? I would suspect that there's going to be an amendment offered at town meeting. We're not doing it. I'm not doing it. But it wouldn't surprise me if there was an amendment to height. I don't know what that is. I don't think it's 7. I think, but I think there's something that could help get it past the finish line that could work for everybody. I don't know exactly what that number is, but I think knowing town meeting and what it takes to get to a 2/3 vote, it's an unpredictable animal, as Mr. Sandman knows, because he's was in it for a long time. And I think we need to be open to that. There's a solution here that's beneficial to City Realty, to the folks, the abutters, the neighborhood, North Brookline, South Brookline into the town. And I think it just may need to take a little bit of work to figure out what that is. We could roll the dice and see if it's 14 stories. I think that's risky, to tell you the truth. I think something a little lower might get you there. Maybe it means bulging something out or making something a little bit higher somewhere else. But anyway, that's my 2 cents.
David?
I would like to see a solution.
I just wanted to clarify, I wasn't suggesting 7 as the maximum height for all 3. I was just referencing the residential building,
Gotcha.
which is already planned to be 7. And I think that's been accepted. And I think there's an understanding of the other 2 need to be taller, but 14 is a bit too tall.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to be the main barrier. And as Paul just mentioned, I really feel it's in the best interest of all involved to try to find a way to reduce those heights even just a little bit so that we can get a more broader buy-in. And the quicker the better, because May is approaching, and I'm sure that City Realty doesn't want to see this get delayed by a year. So hopefully there will be some flexibility there.
Or not, yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. I just want to understand in terms of process, since like you've all obviously been through this before. So there's a step here to determine whether the select board wants to put these articles on the warrant. And what I'm hearing from the group, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that there is that the consensus here is that there is an opportunity and it is worth bringing to town meeting in some form. And we are trying to figure out that form. I'm seeing Paul, you're nodding yes, and I'm seeing David, you're nodding yes, and I'm seeing John, you're nodding yes. Thank you. And so given that, what I hear you saying is that it would be helpful to have a public hearing for this group and the public and the planning department to hear the broad range of opinions on this before we file in the warrant, and then to file in the warrant, and then to hear those opinions again after we file, because we will be doing a public hearing. Is that what I'm hearing from the rest of the
Public
group?
hearing, yeah.
Yeah.
David?
Yes, and also I think to be able to have a timely contingency plan in the event that there is indeed an amendment brought to town meeting for lower density, which I think is extremely likely. It's not difficult to bring an amendment. And as Paul mentioned, that's not something the select board's necessarily going to do, but we don't control all 255 town meeting members. It could happen. It would probably be deemed within scope. And so having a ready plan for that, I think, would increase the likelihood of mutual success rather than waiting for an 11th hour amendment and then it really is too late.
Yeah. Yeah.
In answer to Michael's question, very good question. I think the goal for all of us is ultimately success. We want to have success at town meeting. Given what we're hearing, from the developer, given what we're hearing from the very good chair of this study group, Mike Sandman, given what we're hearing from Michael, my colleague, but also given what we're hearing from some of the members of the study group, and also from the neighborhood at large, the end result is very likely of what we regard as the most likely to succeed. The end result is going to be something less than the absolute max that is in the interest of the developer, and something more than the people who are concerned about this and who might be prone to opposing it at town meeting, something more than they are comfortable with, but something that they would accept. So I think giving them a chance to be heard is the first step towards, hopefully moving some of them to a feasible plan that has broad support from members of the study group, from this select board, perhaps, and I'm assuming, if we do it right, we'll have unanimous support from the select board. But has viability when it gets to town meeting, just like, the effort on MBTACA, which Paul so ably led, and which I played the role of, person who is annoying at every single meeting, by saying, you're still not there yet. You're still not there yet. And they kept going back, and they came up with something, and then it ended up kind of breezing through town meeting. So.
Okay. We have our marching orders?
Yes, we're clear.
Okay, good.
We have a sense of the date when we will come to final
Figure out what,
vote on?
We'll back solve from there.
Yeah.
I think realistically, we'll talk about whether the 10th or the 17th. The 17th is very full. The 17th is
midnight hour.
Yeah, is the budget. I don't think you want to do a 1-2.
Don't anyone leave town.
So I think you really want we'll try and figure out what works in terms of a public hearing, whether that's the 10th. I don't know if you want to have it on the 24th, because then you're going to have to vote after that one way or the other. And I don't think that's necessarily conducive. Well, school vacation is the week of the 16th. You are meeting that day because that's the budget. Sorry,
Cancel those.
I know, but there's the schedule is so tight. There's no snow. As much as we like to try and give you the third Thursday off, we also don't want to then overload you and have you go to 1 a.m. every night.
Okay.
Can I say one thing in closing, Bernard?
Quick thing.
Meredith, thank you.
Thank you.
No,
Thank you.
seriously,
Thank
you have done an amazing job in persistence. So I just want to say thank you for all that you
You've had a great presentation.
It's you have a hard job, and we recognize it. Just want to say thank you.
Thank you so much for your time. Looking forward to coming back and continuing the conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Meredith.
Okay, next we have a relatively short discussion of the Center Street lot update. And I'd like to, are you gonna be here for that or?
I'll stay.
I'm not. Yeah. Okay. I'm not sure we need you to say anything, but I just thought you would just like to enjoy the show. Okay.
You also have Jessica and Sean online.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
Okay, so I'd like to start, I mean, this is a presentation from the project consultant and Center Street Lot Committee, reading from the agenda. A discussion and possible vote on next steps for the Center Street Lot exploratory study. I'd like to have Chaz sort of tell us what those next steps are. I mean, yeah, I think there's a lot of people have attended meetings on this issue that I guess I missed because they think things are going to happen next that I'm not aware of. So I want, Chaz to just, make it very clear what the next steps are in this process, and when something comes back to us, that's going to make a difference in terms of whether we go forward or not.
Sure. And I would.
And by the way, could you also address the issue of the comprehensive plan?
Sure. Maybe Meredith raised her hand. I wonder if she might be better to kind of talk through.
So just as a reminder about the recommended next steps. So last week you received a presentation from the Center Street Lots Committee about sort of how they came to their preferred option in the side lot. And then there was the request to the select board about sort of an endorsement of the side lot or, approval of recommended next steps would be moving forward with the request for information that we would put out to the private development community for feedback about the proposal and to what extent it might lend itself to a successful public-private partnership in redeveloping the lots. So I think we're in a position in the Economic Development Division because we have been down 2 staff members since October. We do have some additional salary funds that have been transitioned to technical consulting services. We would be able to advance a request for information process this fiscal year because of this unusual situation. So I think we were just sort of looking for select board's confirmation in continuing to invest staff time in the pursuit of exploring the side lot and, modifying it.
So just make clear, the vote you're asking for tonight is to just go out there, visit EDAB and others, and come up for next meeting on this with a proposed RFI, which if we voted and it's issued, doesn't commit us to anything.
This is a great question. So if we move forward with the RFI, it will take many months to prepare it. So it would require sort of a tour of various boards and committees throughout town for input so we could get clarity on making sure we're asking the development community the right questions so that we can go back, make some modifications to the proposal, and then maybe develop some zoning that would help support that redevelopment. If there was consensus around an idea and assuming that we didn't uncover any deal breakers, like, if we would need to take the Center Street East lot offline for 2-3 years, that would obviously be a no-go in that situation. So I think the RFI process, you're right, it wouldn't commit us to anything. It is really just an information gathering opportunity so that we can continue to refine the side lot concept, which I think everyone fully expects is going to need to be modified based on other considerations.
And if we gave you a bunch of criteria last week that, that we expect to be included in an RFI. And if that creates an RFI, that means that the side lot is just not feasible at all. We're still able to say, well, let's just clean up the parking lot as is.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, I just want to make clear that we're not committing to anything either today or our next meeting on this.
I think just for the nuance of this, I think if we move forward with an RFI, it is prudent for us to move forward with one of the preferred options, with maybe some alternative options that developers could respond to. But so I do think it is important that we move forward with an RFI, and we're recommending it's based on the side lot, which was the recommended scheme from the committee.
Right. Okay, but that's the side lot, which also addresses some of the concerns that we and other members of the community have raised with respect to not something that's all housing, that addresses certain accessibility issues and, all the other things that we talked about last time.
Yes, absolutely.
And it's just to kind of reiterate, right, the process of drafting any RFI necessarily involves that tour of committees, that community consultation. No one is saying the thing that you saw in the presentation last week is going out to the development community sight unseen, and we're asking them to bid on that. Basically say, will you do this, yes or no? It's going to go through changes and revisions. It's just, to Meredith's point, you don't want to start from nothing. You don't want to start from a situation where you say, what would you do with this? Because that's the kind of process that was just completed. What you're saying is, this process yielded this result. Do you think it's, go out to the committees, get feedback on that process, tinker with it, see whether or not it progresses to a stage where you want to go out to the public, and then put that out there.
Mike?
So I would like to beg to differ a little bit. One of my concerns, and I've heard it expressed from others, is that the side lot proposal is itself not economically viable for various reasons, or it might have some other contingencies that don't allow it to be built, or require significant modifications. And it sounds like from the presentation that was made previously that to date, there really hasn't been any feedback from the developer community on what would be economically viable, and that's the purpose of this RFI. Great. And I think getting that information is critically important. But aside from indicating with the RFI that the side lot was a preferred solution coming from the committee, I wouldn't want the RFI process to either shut down or eclipse or prevent developers who have other ideas from bringing those ideas, however, outside the bounds of the side lot concept, forward, in order for us to consider them if those developers believe that they're economically viable. Because I just think that information is also really important.
Okay, Chess.
And just to that point, in the list of topics and parameters, it says here on the side, the concept is a place to start, not a plan. Expressions of interest based on either the side lot or alternatives that conform to the committee's objective and principles are welcome. And I think that's, again, it's a place to start. It's a process. You don't want to go out with nothing. You have this thing that came out of this community-oriented process, and now you're going to have the opportunity to kind of fine-tune what that looks like before it goes out to the public. But you still ultimately have this bedrock of what are the objectives, what are your base principles, and can you come up with something that conforms to that?
Yeah. Paul?
Yeah. So this may take a little bit, and I have some thoughts that will just take a little bit for me to work through, Bernard. So last night I attended the EDAB meeting. I'm a representative of the board, and it was incredibly informative for me to sit through that meeting. I heard from 3 developers that sit on that committee, well-respected, experienced developers, raise a whole host of questions and concerns about this. Questions that were raised about whether we should even do it, this concept. And they had an extensive discussion. John, I think you might have been in the audience. You probably heard some of it. And the thing that surprised me was that they've never discussed it. They weren't presented with the recommendation from the committee. They did receive updates throughout the process, but it was, we're here, we're there, this is where in the next step. But they were never presented with the concept and asked and provided with the opportunity to give feedback. and recommendations, or vote for that matter. We also received a letter, and so last night, by a unanimous vote, EDAB voted, and we should have received a letter from the chair asking that we delay issuing and voting on an RFI until such time that they can be presented with the recommendations of the committee, their logic for their recommendations, and let them go through the process similar to what they did with Chestnut Hill West. And I would argue that this is more critical than Chestnut Hill West. This is our center of our economic, area of town, Coolidge Corner. And they asked that we delay the vote and let them get briefed, and they will come back. I'm almost done, Bernard.
Wait, delay what vote?
Delay-
The RFI?
Yes,
That's already delayed.
Oh,
I mean,
are you angry?
well, no, I'm irritated.
Well, don't be, well, I'm sorry you're irritated. I sat through the meeting last night. This is what they said. And they're asking to wait. And again, and we have the same thing from Brian Kane. He sent us a note asking that we hold off, slow it down so that the Transportation Board can do the same thing. The Transportation Board has not had the benefit of this recommendation. And this is primarily a Transportation Board issue right now because it is parking. I think we're getting out over our skis on this thing, and I would encourage that this board ask the bodies that it appoints to advise it on critical decisions of this type to give us their candid, unvetted opinions of what the feasibility and wisdom of going forward with this idea. Going with an RFI is actually signaling to the market that, and you heard it from Meredith, and again, I appreciate the work that they did, that this is our preferred option. I don't think this board is in consensus that this is a good idea to do. And I, for one, am not prepared to say that we should do the side lot as a matter of policy to signal to the market that we're willing to do this. There were two developers last night. I think George Kolb said it best. He said, I'm a developer. I have to pick and choose what I spend time on. You're not going to get valuable information from an RFI because it's too early. They don't know, the developers don't know the commitment. It's not an RFP. They don't know our commitment to this idea. And frankly, I don't know our commitment to this idea. It hasn't been vetted. I think we're going too fast. I keep hearing about momentum and we got to keep up the momentum. Why? Why do we have to keep up the momentum? This issue, this idea that kind of sprung up, over the summer and presented as what the town wants, I'm not convinced. I'm not convinced it's a good idea. I'd like to hear from our advisors that we appoint before we take any steps. I think it's a significant mistake to signal out to developers, to the market, to the town for an idea that is just germinated. It's not developed. It doesn't have a foundation. And say we're gonna plow forward with an RFI. I think it's a huge mistake. So I would like to strongly encourage my colleagues to tap the brakes. I would suggest that EDAB have an opportunity to hold a public hearing, deliberate on it, and make recommendations to this board. I'd like to have EDAB do it, the planning board. I'd like to have the HAB because it's housing. They haven't had an opportunity to comment. And also the Transportation Board, which is a specific request by Brian Kane in his email to us this morning.
Okay, so let me understand, Meredith, maybe you can help. What you're asking us to do is to let you loose to go and talk to EDAB, talk to the other, public bodies, and based on that, the information you get there, to come back with a proposed RFI.
Yes.
Okay. So I mean, I guess maybe I'm missing something.
Well, they want to spend.
But we're not voting to commit to anything tonight.
We're committing, what they're asking to do is spend $40,000 to go craft an RFI. Okay. I, for one, am not willing to blow 40 grand on a bad idea. I don't know if this is a good idea. I haven't heard back from our specialists.
It's to help craft an RFI. It's to help.
By the planning department?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
John?
Yeah, but let's not leave out, the RFI would be, oh, by the way, people out there who are in the field of development, there has been a consensus that Brookline wants a parking garage in place of surface parking in their Coolidge Corner parking lot and housing in place of surface parking in their Coolidge Corner Center Street parking lot. What do you think? I don't think there's a consensus in Brookline. So why would we bother going out to developers and misrepresenting that there's a consensus in Brookline? The only consensus that there is that after a process that started, I went back and viewed the tape of the meeting where this all began. It was a year ago, January, early January. And there was a specific point made, and credit to Paul for making this point. There's no mention of housing in this thing we're voting on tonight to launch a so-called Center Street Lots Committee. Shouldn't we be mentioning housing if that's going to be part of their mandate? And the chair of that committee pushed back and said, no, 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 no. And Paul had to ask the question 3 times and still couldn't get any kind of agreement that if we're going to have this committee look at housing, there should be housing in the charge. So if you go to the charge for this committee today, you'll see there was never housing in the charge for the committee. Somehow along the way, that became the preferred element of the Center Street Lots plan, of the committee working for that plan. And then it became the basis for a multiple choice test for a random audience that showed up for a talk on walkability at the Coolidge Corner Theater. And in that random assortment of multiple choice test, given 4 pictures of developments, they said the one that we think is the neatest one is that one number 2 or number 3 or whatever it was. But there never was a preceding establishment of a clear consensus based on clear outreach to the merchant community, outreach to the people who most frequently use the Center Street parking lot, outreach to others who are not necessarily from the area, but who use their cars from other locations, other parts of Brookline, other outside of Brookline, and would not return as shoppers if they couldn't have their surface parking. And there was not a consensus on the transportation board. Our own transportation board chair said he didn't think we should have a parking garage. And somehow that and housing became the basis for what we said was the consensus that Brookline wants and now should become an element of an RFI to see if developers are interested in it. We're way, way ahead of ourselves.
Okay. Michael?
So first of all, I want to at least acknowledge the fact that there was a committee that we established with a charge that worked for a year to come up with where they are at this point. I will agree with you provisionally that may not be a consensus, and so I will grant you that. What I'm trying to figure out is what the process should be in order to establish that consensus and what the role of an RFI is as part of that process. Because we could go to EDAB and we could go to the Transportation Board and we could present and they could hold public hearings and then they could sort of provide feedback, they could write reports or whatever. But if there's not an organizing structure for aggregating all of that feedback into forward progress, then it feels to me like we're spinning our wheels. My understanding of the RFI process that is being proposed is that it includes going to the T-Board, going to EDAB, holding public hearings, and all of those things that we need to do in order to build consensus. And I guess I don't believe that prior to issuing the RFI, given that we don't have consensus, that any developer would presume that we did have consensus. In the last discussion, there was comments about how people didn't want to get engaged until like we had established the zoning for Chestnut Hill commercial area. So when I am thinking about this RFI, I am not thinking about it as a reflection of our current consensus as of today. I'm just thinking about it as a vehicle that we can use to gather and absorb consensus.
Yeah, David?
So first, I want to thank Mike and the other members of the Center Street Parking Committee who put in a lot of work and effort into the proposal that was presented. And what we learned from that is that there are some exciting redevelopment opportunities. That being said, I do agree with Paul about the order in which we proceed from here. I'm not necessarily looking for a long delay. I'm not trying to be the proverbial stick in the mud, but it does seem a little backwards to me that we would seek an RFI before we really know what it is that we're asking for. So the RFI is to try to get relevant information to learn about the viability of the project. But if we don't know what the project will be, then what utility will the RFI provide? So I think at a minimum, by going to EDAB first and to the Transportation Board first and addressing some of these other major policy questions that have arisen as a result of this study, namely whether as a town we're comfortable with the idea of market rate housing on public property. So that's sort of a major policy question that I think needs to be addressed probably first before we're presenting proposals that include market rate housing on public property. Another concern I have is the Babcock Street lot was sort of thrown into this, but was never really discussed in depth by the committee, and yet we're getting an RFI on something that's totally amorphous at this point. So I don't see any harm in going to EDAB, the HAB first, Transportation Board, and then getting their feedback, also considering the broader policy implications around what this, what the Center Street Committee's leading proposal is.
Okay.
I sent around some studies this morning, and the question of surface parking versus garage parking is actually really complex. And I think we would benefit a lot from the expertise on the Transportation Board in figuring out whether that's really the right approach or whether it should be a mix of garage and surface parking and the various variations at play.
Can I ask you, what are you proposing in terms of us going to the EDAB and Transportation Board? I mean, hold hearings with them or?
Not so much us. What I would propose is that the Center Street Law Committee presents to T-Board, get T-Board feedback. Same presentation they gave to us, basically replay it for T-Board, the HAB, EDAB, get their feedback, see if it changes their minds at all, or our minds. More information from the content experts that we appoint is generally very useful. That's the process we undertake when we're considering recommendations for warrant articles, for example.
Okay, Chair?
I'll just, I think it's important to kind of think about the order of operations and use of staff time here. We're going to do that. Are we going to have them go back again and do and do the same thing after? So assume for a second that we do that. We send planning staff to go do 4 different public hearings with 4 different bodies. And then they come back and say, all right, here's a revised presentation. We'd like to go out for an RFI now. We'd like to hire a consultant to go out for an RFI. Are we then going to have to go back with the consultant for the RFI and make the same presentation or a revised presentation to those 4 committees again?
What would the presentation be the second time?
Well, I would assume it would be the result of the process, whatever changes were made in the process.
So let me,
Wait,
yeah.
let him finish.
I mean, I guess this is kind of my question here is, I don't understand what the extra step achieves beyond delay, right? I don't understand if we're trying to get input from these folks to ultimately develop something that we know doesn't represent consensus, but is at least trying to go out to the market and determine what's feasible based on the parameters that we're trying to operate under. Why do it twice, right? Like why go through that? And
Our credibility. So,
Wait, Paul, please.
it's okay. It's okay.
Bernard, can I time off
No,
one second?
no,
Do
no,
you
you're
realize
jumping
that,
into the
do you
discussion
realize
way-
that John speaks, interrupts, speaks for a
No, he
half hour,
doesn't.
you never say a word?
No, he
And when I speak, because you don't agree with me on this issue, that's what you're gonna be. So please stop.
No, I'm not gonna stop. John, did you have your hand up?
Well, yeah, I did, because I'm listening to Chaz. I get that we don't want to send this committee back to redo their work. I don't think they would come to any different conclusion because, and this, I don't say this in any way to be critical. They're enamored of the pictures they were shown of, a parking garage and a parklet. I'm going to call it a parklet. They can call it a park maybe, and housing. Okay. But unfortunately, that was never clearly their assigned mission to come up with schemes for housing to obliterate all the surface parking, housing and a parklet to obliterate all the surface parking in the Coolidge Corner parking area, the Center Street parking area, excuse me.
Okay.
Well, let me finish what I was going to say, if you don't mind. So I don't think they should be the ones. I don't think we should redo it. I think we should really test out what do the people who currently keep Coolidge Corner alive by visiting there all the time, every time of year, day after day, fill that parking lot with shoppers. That parking lot is almost always filled with people who are spending money at Coolidge Corner. This process never even surveyed them to say, would you still come here if you had to park in a parking garage? And yet their presence and their choice of shopping at Coolidge Corner is the most essential element of whether businesses at Coolidge Corner survive.
Okay.
We didn't do that with them. We didn't do the same thing with the neighborhood. This is your neighborhood shopping area. But maybe you're 3 blocks away and maybe you're elderly and you use a car. Would you still use a car if you had to park on the 3rd floor of a garage? We never did that. We never surveyed the merchants. Can you survive if we take away all of that parking and subject you to a 2-year building period? Could you survive if you didn't have the people who park in the existing parking and decide they're not going to come here anymore because of the construction and a garage? We never did that. We could come to a completely different conclusion, and that's why we should, start over. I hate to say it, but start fresh with trying to figure out what the consensus in Brookline really is as to the future of that parking area.
Wait, Mike, and I see Mike, that Mike.
Right.
is
I,
at the
I, I
mic.
would like an
Wait,
apology.
let's-
I'd like an apology for the remark that, well, we would just come back, the committee would just come back because we've looked at a bunch of pretty pictures. That really denigrates the work of a lot of very serious people, including member of the business community who was there, the support, by the way, of David Lachinsky, who chairs the Coolidge Corner Merchants Association. There were so many things wrong with what you said. I really would like an apology
Okay,
for the
Mike-
committee.
Thank you. That's an important point. Mike,
Well-
this Mike, not at the mic.
So when I raised my hand before Chaz had spoken, I actually had the exact same question that Chaz had in terms of the process. Would we need to go back to those committees between the time that we developed a solution, having gone through them once, and the issuing of an RFI? Because if we don't need to do that, then this is just an order of operations question.
Okay, let me hear what David has to say, and then maybe we can wrap this up.
So I certainly don't want to be wasting staff's time, to your point. I'm not sure why staff would necessarily even need to be present at these presentations. The goal would be more to hear from EDAB, hear from the Transportation Board. That information could be synthesized even by uh, members of that board in a memo that goes to staff. Staff reads the memo about what their points are, and then we might want to adjust the proposal that we're building the RFI around. Because right now, where we're clearly hearing there's no consensus, we have one member who wants to start all over again. I don't want to start all over again. I think that this is fine as a starting point, but I don't think it should be the end point. And I understand it's not quite the end point, but essentially, if we go with the RFI first, it's being built around that proposal, and that proposal might fundamentally change after we get feedback from T-Board, which feels very strongly, or at least its chair feels very strongly that there shouldn't be a garage at all. Well, that changes the project entirely. And I think that we would have more clarity around the RFI if we did build some more consensus around the proposal. So again, I'm not asking for there to be a lengthy delay. I'm not asking to start all over again. I'm not trying to discard the excellent work that Mike and the committee did. I just want more feedback
Okay,
from
let-
our
let-
appointed
let me
boards
ask-
first.
So you would not vote for allowing this process to go forward as originally conceived?
At this moment,
Okay,
no.
so
In a
why don't
couple
we-
weeks.
Why don't we
maybe.
vote and resolve this right now?
I'm sorry.
Because it looks like we have 3 votes.
Right, can I
to-
ask sort of a slightly different motion? But
Okay,
But I guess before the motion, right? Because I have had my hand raised for now 10 minutes. I kept getting cut off by the chair to just speak. And by the way, I haven't disparaged anybody. I haven't disparaged the process of the committee. I haven't said to start over.
speak.
No, Bernard, I'm not going to gist. I'm the one that started this, okay? And all I asked was, instead of voting on the RFI tonight, that we go to the boards and commissions that advise us on issues like this to give us their opinion. I'm not looking for some big, long process or some long delay. What's their opinions about this idea? I'm not convinced that this idea is a good one.
Okay,
And until we are convinced that it's a good idea, I want to wait.
okay.
Okay.
So,
Can I,
come
well,
up
for
with
the
a
record, can I
motion.
offer Mike the apology that he's
Okay, quickly.
Mike, I apologize. You were absolutely right. I went overboard with that statement. And I really had in mind that, in fact, the committee was pretty much given that as being the consensus of the group that gathered at the movie house. And they just took that as their assignment now, is we've got to now basically tweak this and make that our consensus. But it did not reflect the work that had preceded in terms of the surveys. There was no overwhelming consensus in those surveys for getting rid of the
May I
surface
make a
parking
motion?
Wait.
or adding housing.
Wait, Paul wants to make a motion. Why
Yeah,
don't
that's
we-
fine.
Yeah.
I'm going
You
to try to
don't need
keep
to
it.
be a weatherman to know which way the wind's blowing. I know which way the wind's
and-
blowing here, so let's
And don't assume,
resolve
yeah,
this.
and.
I also wanted to make a
Yeah,
motion.
And
Okay, so
and rem-
motions on.
yeah, and you may want to amend my motion. And remember, last week I asked for a vote to go forward with the RFI. So that'll tell you how much I changed. I'd like to move that we ask 4 boards: the Transportation Board, the Economic Development Advisory Board, the HAB, and the Planning Board to receive a presentation on this recommendation from the Center Street lots. And I would suggest it be a public hearing. And let those committees write us a memo on their issues, concerns, and recommendations around the idea of the side lot to us. I don't want it filtered. And then we can decide, do we tweak it? Do we accept it, or we just kill it?
Okay, so with respect to HAB, we're meeting tomorrow. And I'm not sure we can, it's not on the agenda.
No, it's
so-
too late.
I noticed that.
So our next meeting is the first week of March.
Okay.
So we're talking about, at least with respect to HAB, and I assume similarly with other bodies, pushing this off into March.
Yeah, it could be a couple of months delay.
Start, you know, even.
Yeah.
So, okay, that's one motion.
Okay, so as an amendment or an addition to that motion, what I would propose also is that we direct staff to coordinate with those committees to make those presentations, and to gather their feedback and organize their feedback into a report for this body.
Okay, by the way, Chad said that you're raising an issue of staff time
I,
and resources, which,
I understand that, and to the extent that we have to spend some of that $40,000 in order to accomplish this, I would propose that we do so.
So let me take a pause there, Matt, as a practical matter. We're gonna hire someone. What you're basically proposing is that we hire someone to, rather than officially draft an RFI, draft a consolidation of the views of those 4 boards and committees. Do I understand that correctly?
Yes, in order to help inform whether or not we should do an RFI.
That's not my
and move
proposal.
forward.
okay.
Yeah, okay.
I have a motion on the table. He's offered to amend it, right? Michael has offered to amend my motion, which was
Like-
to have staff consolidate it.
We're giving
Yeah.
David an
I'd
opportunity.
like to offer perhaps another slight amendment that's more towards you. So given the issues about staff time, which I'm very sensitive to, perhaps this could be a joint meeting of these boards so that staff perhaps attends that one meeting and they don't have to do
But
repeat
that's
everything.
really a logistical nightmare.
Or maybe you do it in 2
Do it-
meetings. It-
Maybe we shouldn't be directing those boards how they.
Let the boards figure it out.
However
Let
they
the
want to
boards
do
figure
it, but
it
I'm
out.
just sensitive to staff time.
I would suggest, given the sensitivities on staff time and so forth, I understand what you're trying to do, which is I understand what I think you're trying to do, which is you're trying to help the process along by having us having someone brought in to help do this work, so that if you decided to then move forward with an RFI, that work would be done, the groundwork would be laid for it. The issue there is, well, we have to sign a contract for that. We have to procure that. It's going to take, the whole point of us getting time the point of us asking you for the permission to proceed with drafting the RFI is in parts that we could come back with that procurement. I think it would be complex for us to try and do that in kind of 2 stages. It adds a lot more to the time and effort. I think if we're going to do this, and Meredith can tell me if I'm speaking out of turn here, I think we would rather just have the boards and commissions meet, and we'll take that as is. I mean, I think what you're going to get back. I can't speak to the boards and commissions about what you're going to get back. But I don't think I think adding that layer to it is going to make it even more complicated and slow it down even further. But I appreciate what you're trying to do.
Fine. I'll withdraw.
Okay. I want two quick points. One, I wouldn't hire a consultant to have the boards and commissions take this as a normal course of their business and give us feedback. It would slow things down, Bernard. I understand that. In the words of Sandy Silk, George Cole and Ken Lewis, I believe, I'm not sure if Ken said it last night. There's nothing happening in the market. Time is our friend on this. There's no reason to rush. So, I would direct the boards and commissions to find a way to give us feedback on whether this is a good idea or not. And if it isn't a good idea, would they amend it or would they say bag it? That's what I'd like to know.
Okay, so you have a motion on the floor.
Yep.
Do you withdraw your motion?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I guess, one other factor that is, I think, critically important is that the current parking lot is a mess.
Right.
And the delay is delaying addressing really serious issues at that parking lot with respect to accessibility and with respect to just the chaos that sometimes exists there. So, I mean, if that's what we're going to do, that's what we're going to do.
Well, we weren't
Okay.
presented,
I
we
don't,
weren't presented with an option of fixing the parking lot. We were presented with building a garage and housing.
Option one was that option.
I'll vote on that one tonight.
kinda,
I have
yeah.
I have 2 other comments. I have 2 other comments. One is that I would like, to the extent that this is going to take staff time, and I do believe it will take staff time, and to your point, I would like to make sure that the Chestnut Hill commercial area work that we need in order to get that move forward is prioritized over this, so that we can get that project moved forward.
I
Number
support
one.
that. And
Um, And number two is that the committee also gave us a recommendation to move forward with the wayfinding work. And independently of the RFI, that recommendation is still, could still be pursued independently. And maybe we should take that up separately and not tonight, but it would be worthwhile also to take that up.
I will say wayfinding remains in the draft FY27 budget, which you should be seeing on the 17th. Wayfinding is proceeding independently.
Okay.
Yeah, is there anything we can do to maybe fix the curbs and otherwise address accessibility issues?
I mean,
without going through a.
we can talk, I mean, we'll talk, especially when DPW presents part of the budget, we'll talk about the pavement management plan, the sidewalks plan, the stuff that we're doing and how we're prioritizing that work. But I think it's important to realize that there's a long list of things out there that need fixing. And so
Yeah.
we want to be, and there's now a process that Paul and Mike helped put in place that does really good work about figuring out how to prioritize that. So I think we got to be mindful when we talk about these issues that it's when it's tempting, it is often tempting when we see these things come up to be like, oh, we got to have that jump the line. You don't want to make line jumping the reality or else it just defeats the process.
Okay. So I think that the consensus is that we're not going to vote tonight. Is that correct?
Well, there's a motion on
There's a
the
motion
floor. Yeah, I think we
to
should vote on
direct
that
these
motion.
boards to give us feedback on the side lot proposal.
Okay. All in favor, John?
Wait, I'm sorry, on the sidewalk?
On the side lot. It's
Side
called the
lot,
side lot proposal from this,
Okay.
from this.
Yeah, fine, yeah.
Paul?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Michael?
Yes.
I don't agree with that, so no, but it passes, so. Yes, now we have to figure out what that means.
Well, that's what I wanted to speak to. Yeah, if you don't mind. There's a lot to be learned just from listening in on the discussions of those boards. I mean, in one respect, what we're asking for tonight, EDAB just did. And if they were to actually have taken a vote, which there wasn't enough support there for them to actually take a vote to recommend this to us, and that's why we got the letter we got. It's not so much how they would have voted as what was said. What was said by Ken Lewis. What was said by George Cole. What was said by some of the other members of EDAB, all making extremely good points as to whether this would be economically advantageous or actually economically disastrous for our Coolidge Corner shopping area. So even if there somehow emerged a 3-2 vote from EDAB, it might be that the select board, who are the final, adjudicators of all of this, having listened to the conversation that was, took place, sort of said, well, the 3-2 vote, but frankly, based on what I heard from X, Y, Z, I, a select board member, don't think this is a good idea. And there's so many other examples I could cite of what we as select board members could be listening to that maybe don't get heard. Voices of people who answered a survey when they did the pop-up parklet during this whole process, and person after person after person said, don't touch the parking. But that didn't get somehow reflected in the end result of that process. But if we heard it, maybe we would decide there's just too many people here who shop there every day who are telling us, don't get rid of that parking, that surface parking. So we still have to, we can't abandon our judgment for, well, 2 boards said yes and 1 board said no, so therefore we go ahead with it. We've got to sort of dig into what was said by those board members during their discussions and what we think is the right thing to do.
Okay. Okay, we had our vote. Chad, you want to?
Yeah, I'm sorry, just one quick thing, which is, I think as you continue to work through your 2030 roadmap, and we go back to that as part of your working session in March, one thing that I would like to propose, and I think might be helpful, is that we talk seriously about a goal or objective about processes. about public processes and about public analysis. Because I think, candidly, I think we're struggling. I think we're struggling. We have been trying to adjust to the feedback that we receive about, and mindful of the fact that ultimately, as Paul has pointed out and others have pointed out, right, that, you know, for some people, no process is ever enough, and process becomes the means of expressing just simple disapproval. I don't like it.
Decision-making.
Right. I don't like it. And so, but I don't want to say that I don't like it. So I can say that the process is flawed. And that's not, let's be clear. That's the outlier, right? That's the kind of last vestige there. But a good way to avoid that is to be able to say to the public credibly, as you pointed out, no, we conducted a process that worked, a process that everyone can agree on and live with. And when we struggled with Boylston Street, the lesson we took from that, well, maybe there needs to be a process that is more forwardly iterative and staff-driven so that committees don't deadlock and present nothing when an opportunity presents itself. And that led to Chestnut Hill West. And then we heard, well, the committee didn't take a vote. The committee feels that it was unheard. Okay. We can take that feedback and fine tune it. With this committee that worked for a year, you know, we're hearing, and I appreciate that the answer is not no. The answer is we want to hear more. We want to hear this. It would be helpful to know at the outset of these processes what you think the community is going to need in order to accept that the process was complete and well done. So the feedback we're hearing here is helpful, but I think more generally we need to think about what that looks like and where we can come up with a process or set of processes depending on the project that will not just satisfy the community, but satisfy the board, such that the board can say and feel confident and sleep at night, turning to community members who say, I disagree with this, and say, you're allowed to disagree, but we had a process and the process was sufficient. So I hope as we turn to that in the coming months with so much else on your plates, I know there's a lot to think about, but that we can think about what that looks like so that we don't run into situations where we go through a year and then we get this feedback and it feels like, man, we did the wrong thing again. Like we didn't do enough. What is enough and how do we get there?
Hey, Dave.
So I appreciate what you're saying, Chaz, but I'm not sure why the takeaway from this is we're rejecting a process of a full year. That's at least not where I'm coming from. I just want 4 boards to meet once and give us their opinion. That's it. I don't see that as throwing away a year's of work. The year of work was very important. It put together an intriguing proposal. I like many elements of the proposal. There are other elements that are open questions for me. I just want to hear what our boards have to say. That's all. And I don't see that as throwing anything away. And that's actually our typical process in other areas, like with warrant articles. We often hear what the advisory committee thinks and what they had, if it's a housing related warrant article. We have public hearings and then we decide our position. So that's sort of the model that I'm thinking of in this context, but obviously we'll discuss that further at a workshop.
And I would, Bernard, I would like to just add on to that. So first, I want to thank the planning department because I think they have the hardest jobs in town. You have a harder job than our police department, a fire department, although you don't run into burning buildings or have to wrestle with the folks that are trying to harm you. You get grief from all sides because you're the tip of the spear for change. There is no standard process, right? You can do best practices, but ultimately every situation is different. And what does it take for this board to support a recommendation? If we learned from the Harvard Street, right? That thing had a ton of engagement. I mean, Marie Morelli worked around the clock, right? And still, it took a little bit of extra to get the thing past the finish line. The amount of work that the Chestnut Hill West Committee's been doing, Mike knows how much work they've been doing. Lots of boards and commissions engagement, tons of public meetings. It came to the board and you're hearing, well, we might have to tweak it, right? The process is always never enough because we're imperfect. we're not going to do things perfect every time, but we have to be willing to ask questions, to ask for additional information. And it's not a message to staff that they're somehow failing, right? We're dealing with human beings here. And the bigger the project, the more constituents that are involved. It's complicated as heck. And, this one in particular is very complicated for all the reasons that John mentioned. I don't want us to start over. I think David's right. We're asking for more information. Let's see what the boards and commissions say. And I think, and this will be the last thing I'll say, Bernard, a strong foundation of an idea helps us go the distance with it. An idea like this is going to take 2/3 of town meeting. It's going to take probably some boards to approve it, right? It's going to take this board to give away air rights and such. We need a strong foundation to start. And I think if you get too far too early, that foundation isn't strong enough to carry you all the way.
Okay, so with that, we'll move on to our next item, which is whether there are any public comments left over from our earlier public comment session. Okay, no? Then the meeting's over. Thank you.